The whistle, you don't wake up. You're torn out of sleep, like a page ripped from a book. By the whistle, it knifes through the dark at 5 on the dot. A banshee scream bouncing off brick and iron, slicing down Orchard Street, through tenement walls so thin a hard thought could punch through. The January cold is already inside the room, in your chest, in your bones, sitting heavy on your breath. You're 12, but your back argues otherwise. The mattress under you crunches like dry leaves corn husks that used to be full and now lie flat as a lie, stuffed into ticking, stitched and restitched by hands too tired to make anything pretty. Marco's foot is in your ribs. Anna's hair is on your lips. Your mother is a second flame in the room. The first is the kerosene lamp. The second is the sound of match, strike, and breath. The practiced hush as she shields the wick from a draft that sneaks through wooden seams. The light paints her face. Older than 32. It paints the frost feathers curling across the inside of the single window, the brick wall 6 inches away beyond that glass. The tin cup, the hard bread, the corner pail you'll carry down for flights when the hallway is less like a night sea. Yeppa, she says in Italian, soft as a prayer. Joey to the foreman, Yeppy to your mother. 2 names, 1 stomach. You don't stand, you assemble yourself. Shirt, pants, the 2 short legs showing ankle. Boots with newspaper, soles. No soles because, in this city, words and shoes both get worn thin fast. You flex your fingers and the skin protests. Cotton and oil have their own alphabet. They've been teaching it to you with cuts and grit day after day. You drink the coffee that isn't coffee, just heat and bitterness and courage, and you dunk the bread until it yields. Papa, you ask, though the silence already knows. Left at 4 to fight 4-day work at the docks, where men come early. And hope, late Anna peeps from the blanket, small and bright as a match head. Candy, tonight, you say, and it's a promise made of air. But sometimes air is what keeps people from drowning. The hallway is darker than the room. No windows. The smell walks with you. Kerosene, cabbage, wet wool, babies, tuberculosis. You find the stairs with your hand on the wall slick with grease from 1,000 hands, and you count the broken tread on the second flight without looking. The front door huffs you out to a street that's busy before the sun is. Carts rattling, hooves sparking, breath steaming. Vendors building their little empires of bruised apples and tired onions and hope. The Lower East Side is the most crowded place you've ever seen. Crowded even with the people you can't see, the ones who didn't make rent, the ones who didn't make mourning. You fall into a river of children flowing factory ward. Irish caps, Jewish eyes, Polish cheekbones, Italian hands, Greek scarves, allegedly. Tommy Flanagan lopes up beside you, 13 going on 40, 2 fingers missing from last summer. He wiggles the ghost of them and grins, like it's a joke he's telling to keep the world from telling it first. Cold enough to bite steel, he says. At least we ain't in the mines, you say, thinking of a cousin you only know from letters other people write for him. 11 years old, a breaker boy, a child built for darkness, the way birds are built for air, ahead. The Anderson mill nudges the sky. Brick, smoke, windows that are more grime than glass. Inside, power looms and spinning frames, belts and gears, and a floor that vibrates with a heartbeat you'll learn to match, because if you don't, it chews you. The time clock is a judge with 1 sentence. Late, you join the line. Adults go first. You practice not thinking about the penny that will vanish if the minute hand beats you. You practice not thinking about anything that costs more than a thought. Kowalski the foreman, Not the neighbor carries his stick like it's a conversation. Starter, he taps it against his palm, against tables, against the air, and the sound says everything words would only complicate. He sees you, sees your height, your hands. You see him, see you. It's always like this, a weighing that never lands in your favor. Punch, 5:31. 1 minute late. A penny for the privilege of being here. Then the room hits you. Not warmth, just not outside. The air is a storm of white, fiber floating like snow that doesn't melt, that you breathe until your chest sounds like someone shaking a paper bag. The machines are a city of their own clacking, rattling, humming, the long moan of belts overhead, the exhale of steam, the sudden staccato of some part failing and someone running before failure becomes news. Awake or what, Marie? At the next frame, red hair braided and tucked. 11 with a voice like she's seen the census and doesn't expect to be counted. She moves like a magician's hands. Grab, swap, tie, dodge, out. It's the dance start in, lift the full bobbin. Land the empty, don't get caught, don't get caught. You copy the rhythm you've taught your body, and the body obeys because it knows the tax for error. You last 9 minutes before the first slice of the day opens. A whisper of blood, you don't look. Looking makes it real. You grip the wooden core and keep the thread from snapping, and it snaps anyway, and you knot it before Kowalski's stick finds the back you forgot belonged to you. Sophia shows up before 7, a new sweeper. Small enough, you could tuck her into the space between 2 bobbins and a prayer. Her mother works 3 rows over and doesn't look once, because looking is a luxury you can't afford when the machine you feed is also feeding your family. The girl crawls under the frames with a brush and a pan, inches from motion, so fast it looks still. The story of the morning writes itself in sounds, the torn scream and the cut-off scream, the sick clatter of something giving way, the accident whistle that says we're about to pretend nothing happened. The boy is 10. Then he isn't. They carry something out under a sheet that doesn't make the shape any better. Work continues. It always does. It's the one dependable thing in the room. Break is 15 minutes and feels like a rumor. For toilets for 200 bodies. Math that teaches you to hold your water and your tongue. The barrel water tastes like coin. Marie unwraps half a potato and bread that learned mold as a language weeks ago. She offers, you refuse, she eats. It's all love, Roosevelt. Someone says, Governor, he might come again. You could laugh. You don't. Laughter costs breath. Back at the frame, you see Michael, 8 years old and trying to be tall. His sleeve kisses a gear and the gear kisses back with teeth. Your shout drowns. You move. Your body gets there. You grab him. The fabric gives. You fall together, his small bones like a bundle of twigs, your shoulder like a firework going off. Wrong. He's whole. That's the only math that matters to you. Kowalski looms with his stick and the book where pennies go to die. 2, he says. You nod because there's nothing else to do. You're 12 and you've never known anyone who won an argument. With the rent by 10, the fibers have set a camp in your lungs. By 11, your hands are maps of places you never wanted to travel. By noon, the sun finally remembers this side of the glass and draws lines through the dust so pretty you want to hate them for being pretty here. Lunch is 20 minutes and tastes like the outside air cold, honest, free. Tommy talks about a strike like it's a story you tell around a stove. 10 hours. Safety guards. Pay that doesn't steal itself back by way of fines and the company store. He says Pullman. He says blood. He says maybe. You go back in with the word maybe folded into your pocket like a note. You don't dare read, yet afternoon is a long tunnel with a pinprick of 6:30 at the end. The belt upstairs snaps and the building shudders, and, for one beat, the silence is louder than everything that's ever been loud. You hear your heart count itself. You hear Marie whisper a song her grandmother taught her across an ocean. You hear the older women holding back the sound of what grief wants to do. You hear your own thought. I don't want Anna here. Not ever. The Pinkerton man shows earliest lick hat, notebook, eyes like he's shopping. He memorizes faces the way hunger memorizes doorways. Harrison the floor boss with teeth made of policy walks beside him and points, quietly efficient. The list writes itself. At 2:15, your bleeding stops, and that's worse. Nerves gone dumb don't argue with gears. Marie goes white around the mouth. You burn a penny on the privy and steal rags and a crust from the medical box, which is an insult with a lid. You palm the bread to her, piece by piece. And she doesn't thank you because thanks are receipts and you can't afford to owe or be owed. At 3:45. Something explodes at the far end. A gear flying like a tossed coin with no chance of tails. Embedding in a wall where a boy was not standing because luck is a character in this story and today it chose him. They sacked the kid anyway. Negligence, Harrison writes, and the word feels like he'd picked it up with clean fingers. The last hour is a climb on splintered knees. The night shift floats in, looking like a lie about rest. The whistle saves you and condemns you in the same breath. Time clock. 6:31. You watch your day shrink to $3 ansem. Less the pennies they peeled from you, one by one like skin. Outside, the air is a knife you're grateful for. Anthony steps into your path, and the future tries to pick a fight with the present. Then Marie is there, and Tommy, and even limping Stefan, and 5 beats 1, and the math works for once. Anthony stands down because even boys who want to be wolves know when the pack is against them. On the walk home, you buy a single boiled sweet with a dime. Your mother doesn't know you carry. It's not for you. You don't know that yet. You just know your hand closes around it. Like a promise the newsboy hawks, Roosevelt condemns child labor. Between coughs you don't want to listen to too closely. The headline is a lantern, but the street remains the street. Upstairs, your mother's face softens when you enter. The soup is water with ambition, and it tastes like being alive. Anna asks for candy, and you put a miracle in her palm and say nothing about the word tomorrow knocking in your ribs. Later, in the bed that isn't one, staring at a ceiling you could draw from memory, the whistle is already tucked somewhere behind your ear, waiting. But there's something else there now, too. The idea that machines can be hungry and still starve. You close your eyes with that thought between your teeth, as if holding it there could sharpen it into something useful. The picket line, the whistle, shrieks, and the city answers. But you don't. You are awake when it comes, because you didn't really sleep. Not the way humans sleep. You hovered at the edge, hearing the building's night language, the coughs, the creaks, the baby cry that's too thin, the argument that ends in a crash, and the quiet that follows like a threat. You rehearsed the morning in your head and then refused the cue. Yep, bae. Your mother asks, not like a question, like a test she hopes you'll fail. I'm not going in, you say, and the room gets smaller. Your father looks up, the habit of being strong, fighting the physics of being exhausted. His jaw works. The space fills with everything nobody ever had the words or time for. Marco tries bravery. Anna tries not to breathe. Your mother closes her eyes like she's praying at a rail station where trains don't stop. Then be home by noon. She says at last, a sentence made of 3 parts love, 1 part calculation. The street outside is a different river today. The kids are still there. Work doesn't stop being a promise. Because you broke your piece of it, but there are men and women, too, gathered in clumps that are trying to become lines. Some hold scraps of cardboard lettered with anger and spelling. Some hold nothing but their hands. Everyone holds their breath. Tommy finds you, his face bright with the kind of fear that looks like joy from a distance. You came, he says, like you were a coin flip the whole night. I came, you say, and feel the word click inside your chest. The mill looms like a church, the way a prison sometimes does. Harrison is on the steps with a statement already. In his pocket and a deputy beside him for punctuation. Behind them, 3 men in hats stand like they're measuring. Pinkertons breed in 3s. Marie is not here. The rumor moves like wind. Charity hospital. Alive, maybe. Stefan is here and shouldn't be. His foot has gone the color of bad fruit. You say his name and he lifts a hand and you see the tremor he's trying to bury under his coat sleeve. He should be in bed. He should be anywhere but here. He is here anyway. Hold the line. Someone shouts, and you learn what a line is, the shape people make when they decide to be one thing together. You learn it with your feet, with your shoulder pressed to Tommy's and your other shoulder pressed to a man who smells like coal. And a winter without meat. You learn how to march without moving. The first wave of workers arrives, faces complicated as prayer, fear, anger, calculation, loyalty to hunger, loyalty to hope. Some stop, discovered in the act of deciding. Some slide sideways into the alley and vanish. Some walk forward with eyes fixed on a spot half a mile away, as if the door will lift to meet them. You don't shout names. You don't want those names to taste like accusation in your mouth for the rest of your life. You shout words that feel big enough to hold anyone. With us. Not today. We keep us. Harrison reads a paper about trespass and order. The wind edits him. The crowd edits him more. A Pinkerton smiles the way a blade does. The deputy taps the baton against his leg like he's marking time. Capital letters. The first scab, he's a boy. You hate that tries to slip through a seam in the line. And the seam closes because everybody learned how fabric works at least once. In their life. Someone's hand catches his sleeve, gentle, almost fatherly. Brother, the man says, which is both true and a mercy. Not this way. The boy shakes, looks at the door, at the hand, at the yard of street between what his mother needs and what his mother will forgive. He steps back and the line breathes like a chest. It doesn't go like that every time. A woman tries next, jaw set, a baby under her scarf, the kind of heart that either broke yesterday or will break tomorrow. She looks at you and you see yourself 10 years from now in her eyes, and it scares you more than the deputy's stick. A gap opens because nobody can stand between a mother and heat in January. She goes inside and the line learns something about itself and forgives itself in the same lesson. You hold on anyway. The newsboys orbit like hungry planets. Strike at Anderson. They cry, and for a second you see a headline bigger than a man. Then you see the boy's coat too thin, too small, and the world shrinks to the exact size of the human body again. At 9, the speech happens. There's always a speech. It's how people braid their fear together so it doesn't fray. The speaker is an old woman with hands like rope and a voice that makes men stand up straighter. She's worked longer than most of you have been alive. She counts the names of dead kids, and the silence after each name is so full you could sleep inside it. She names the burns like saints. She names the coughs by season. She says, shorter hours, guards on the belts, pay for the hurt, school, for the small, or we stop feeding your gods. It is not poetry, it's better. It's a grocery list for dignity. The Pinkertons don't applaud. By 10, the police line thickens. You learn a new math. How many boots equal a baton charge? How many cameras equal restraint? There are cameras to Damon with tripods and single explosions of light that make people blink and stand taller. Jacob Rees could be anywhere, or it could be a clerk with a borrowed lens. You don't care. You hold the line a little firmer around the glass eye, because sometimes justice needs proof, like a body needs bread. Harrison tries to open his mouth into the crowd again, and the wind eats his punctuation. A foreman you don't know well strides into the line, and the line ripples instead of tearing. This is a new skill, learning when to bend. The foreman shoves. Someone shoves back. The deputy lifts the baton and puts it down again because a camera blinks. You feel the city learning slowly, with bruises what it takes to put hands on children when the sun is watching. At 11. A man from the Union Hall 3 streets over arrives with a crate. Not pamphlets, bread. Real bread that smells like Sunday. He hands it out like communion, and you discover your eyes are water and you have to swallow around them. You take 2 pieces. One for you. One for the part of you that is still a brother for a girl in a hospital bed. Marie made it through the night, someone says. The line shifts with that news, as if weight moved from one shoulder to another. A woman you've only seen once slips you a folded handkerchief. Inside, a sliver of cheese. She says nothing. You nod like you just learned her true name. The mill door opens at last like a throat clearing. 3 managers stand there with faces like floors. The deputy steps forward and his baton forgets the cameras exist. It taps, it warns. It says the next chapter will have blood in it and doesn't apologize. Behind the managers, the machines are already running, fed by the hands that did go in and the hands of kids brought from somewhere else. You feel the sound as betrayal. Then you feel your heartbeat and realize betrayal is a word for private things. This is not private. This is a war. The first charge is messy and therefore merciful. No horses, not yet. Just men and sticks and the confusion that keeps real damage from landing. You don't go down because Tommy's hand is inside your coat sleeve, and Stefan is behind you like a fence, even on one good leg. You taste iron that isn't blood yet. You push, you hold, you learn. That fear and fury weigh the same and can be lifted with both hands if 100 people lift with you. It lasts a minute or an hour. Time abandons the scene like a coward. When it returns, a boy you didn't know by name is on the cobbles, with a cut eyebrow and a look like betrayal after all. A cop has his hat and knows it. The Pinkerton smiles his blade smile. The cameras record everything and nothing, and you are in the middle of it. A thin thing yelling with a chest that finally remembers it is allowed to be loud. Then snow starts, the softest rebuke. Fat, lazy flakes drifting down, landing on coats, on hats, on the black wool of the deputy like ash. The men hesitate because snow makes everything look like a holiday card if you squint. Somebody laughs, and the sound breaks the tension cleanly. In one place and not at all in another. You keep standing. You keep being a person in public at noon. The hospital rumor returns with an upgrade. Marie is awake, asking for bread, cursing in Irish and English and whatever language pain speaks. You sigh a prayer you didn't know you stored. Another name is handed out, and this one is not for a tally of the dead. A man in an overcoat you recognize only because all the papers have taught you to recognize him pushes through the edge of the crowd. Not Roosevelt, not today. A city councilman, maybe, but the kind that likes cameras. He says words about review and balance and our great city, and they stack up like crates with nothing inside. The old woman with rope hands looks at him the way an ocean looks at a pebble. You like her more than you liked anyone you were not related to. Then there's a sound from inside the mill that any one of you could identify in sleep. The groan of a belt slipping wrong. The machines cough. The line turns as one. Human faces aimed at a brick wall that has never deserved an audience. You imagine, because hope is an insect that can crawl under any door, that the gears will seize and the belts will snap and the looms will go quiet long enough for someone important to hear what silence sounds like. They don't. The cough passes. The men on the steps smile small and broken by one. The city has started to learn the gossip of what you are doing. Women from 3 streets over arrive with pot soup that tastes like someone loves you. The line widens, contracts, breathes like a living thing. You see faces you know from different rooms, church pews, bar stools, the corner where music sometimes sneaks out on Saturday. You realize a neighborhood is not a map, it's a mouth. Today it says your name, dot, at 2. The horses come, dot. They are beautiful, which is unfair. They are black and shining, and the leather creaks like what you'd want your future to sound like if you could afford a future. The riders sit with the kind of back posture that says they will outlast your bones. The line goes quiet because this is a chapter most of you only heard about from uncles. Kowalski is nowhere to be seen. Harrison is, though, jaw set, watching to see how many of you belong to him after this afternoon. The Pinkertons look like they've been waiting all day to get to this paragraph. The first advance is slow and theatrical. The horses feel the snow and the crowd and the doubt riding both. The riders raise batons like punctuation again. The old woman moves to the front, which is what old women do in cities that intend to live. She lifts both hands and begins to sing. It is not a hymn, you know, but you know what it means. People join, you join. Your voice is a thin wire connecting you to 100 others. The horses do not sing. They don't understand how, when they surge, it's like weather. The line breaks in 2 places and stitches itself closed in 3. A baton finds Tommy's shoulder, and Tommy finds a swear he didn't know he had, and then finds your sleeve again. Stefan goes down on one knee and comes up like a sailor with a deck under him. A horse's flank presses your arm, and you can feel the heat and the sheer living weight of it. The deputy says, disperse, in a way that lets you know he practiced in a mirror. You do not disperse. You don't have anywhere else to go. Then something small and enormous happens. The boy who tried to scab in the morning slings a rock knot at a face, not at a horse butt, at a 2nd-story window. The glass breaks like an alarm. The room inside freezes. You see girls in shirtwaist sweepers, doffers, staring out at the snow and the people and the sudden fact that this is today. One of them raises a hand and you raise yours back. It is nothing. It is a bridge. The riders hold. The Pinkertons take notes like they're hungry. The deputy counts his men again with his eyes and does arithmetic you hope is wrong. The cameras pop. The snow commits to the bit dot at 3. The line is still there. You are still there. The mill is still roaring, but less proud about it somehow. A priest comes, collar crooked, and says a prayer over the soup like it's a saint. A reporter tucks a notebook and asks you your name and age, and you say, Joey and 12, and it feels like you just signed something important with a pencil. Stefan's face has gone grey enough that the colour should have its own word. Go, you say, and he shakes his head. Pride is a bad doctor. Go, you say again, and this time he hears your mother's voice in yours and the sense in it. Tommy gets under his arm and you watch them limp off toward a charity ward that smelled like bleach the last time you went past. You'll bring them soup later if there's any left. Bye 4. The horses leave because somebody in a warm office decided it would play badly. The Pinkertons don't. They lean in doorways, as if they could ever belong to a building like this. Harrison stops, pretending to address the crowd, and begins practicing speeches for shareholders in his head. At 5, the snow thins to a chalky dust. Street lamps struggle on. The machines inside don't care that day and night exist. You see faces. In the windows again, the girls and boys who fed those gods today. One presses her palm to the glass. You press yours to air. You promise nothing out loud. You promise everything inside. 6 comes, and with it the change of shifts, which is not a change at all, just a different set of hands on the same hunger. You make a choice. You step forward enough to be noticed and not enough to be removed. You say with your thin, used-up voice, tomorrow again. The crowd says it back, a chorus with 1,000 parents. Tomorrow again. You walk home on feet that don't want to, past a newsboy hawking your day for 2 cents, past a woman sweeping her stoop like it matters, past a window where someone plays a fiddle low. Upstairs, your mother reads the snow on your coat and the tired in your mouth and nose. She sets a bowl in front of you. Your father watches you like men watch the sea, afraid and proud and sure it will win. Anna crawls into your lap like you are a chair that remembers back when it was a tree. You eat. You breathe. You think of Marie saying bad words with a nurse smiling despite herself. You think of Stefan counting ceiling cracks and trying not to. You think of the girl behind the broken window, palm up against winter, looking at the street. Like a map, you do not ask whether any of this matters. You decide it has to, and let the decision be the answer. When you lie down, the whistle is not behind your ear. It is outside, with the snow, stranded, waiting for you to fetch it. You do not dot tomorrow. Again, night works, no falls like quiet ash. It makes the street look clean, even when it is not. You stand there a moment, breathing steam, feeling the throb in your shoulder where Kowalski's stick found you yesterday, feeling the sting in your hands where the cotton lives now. The picket line broke up at dusk. Not broken, just folded. Like a flag you plan to raise again at first light. Kitchen first, Tommy says. Then the hospital. You nod. It is a plan. Plans help your legs move when they want to stop. The church basement smells like onions and wet wool. Women you know by face and not by name stir big pots and boss the room like generals. An old priest blesses the soup. He looks tired and stubborn. That makes him your kind of holy. There are boxes of bread from a union hall, jars of pickles from a grocer who swears he can't afford it and gives anyway. Someone has a ledger. Someone else has a chalkboard. There are lists: who eats here, who can carry 2 shut-ins, who is sick, who watches for Pinkertons on the corners. The lists look like order. Order looks like hope. You and Tommy carry 2 loaves and a beaded tin cup wrapped in a rag. Out in the snow, your boots try to remember how to be waterproof and fail. A woman with red hands meets you at the first door. 4 kids crowd her hem. You hand her bread and she tells you their names like she is handing you pieces of herself. At the next door, a tailor thanks you in Yiddish and then in English. You don't catch the words, but gratitude is the same in both. Behind you, the old woman with the rope hands runs the sidewalk like it's a factory floor she actually owns. Block captains, she barks. Eyes on the corners, to knocks. If they're Pinkerton. 3 if police. Lamp in the window, if a child is hurt, we keep us. People nod. Orders turn into habits before the snow melts. You cut through the alley to the back stairs of the hospital. Not the front entrance. That costs pride and sometimes coins. The charity ward is up 2 flights, left at the smell of bleach. The nurse at the door is a big woman with a soft face and a hard voice. 10 minutes, she says, which means more if you are quiet and less if you are not. Marie's bed is near the far window. Her hair is loose and dull. Her color is better than you feared, worse than you wanted. She sees you and lifts her chin like a dare. That feels right. You slip the rag-wrapped tin into her hand under the blanket. She looks at you like you just handed her the ocean. It's hot, she whispers. It's soup. You whisper back, don't make me laugh, she says, and you almost do, and then you don't. Because there is a girl 2 beds over who is not moving enough for laughter. To make sense in this room. How long? You ask, until the bleeding stops. The nurse says from nowhere. Then we see if the body remembers how to be a body. She needs protein. Bread and broth help. We'll bring more, you say. Too fast, the nurse nods at the tin cup, like she already knew you would. Marie holds your wrist. Her fingers are small and strong and warm from the soup steam. The reporter came, she says, from the paper, took down names, real names, wrote the story like it mattered. It does, you say, right, too, she says, eyes on yours. You, or tell it to somebody who can. Make them see, if they won't see, make them hear. You think of the cameras popping like lightning. You think of the boy who threw the rock at the window so the kids inside could look out and see the street that was trying to see them. You nod like a promise. You do not say you are 12. The truth is heavy. You cannot carry all the heavy. At once, the nurse claps once, gentle but final. Out you go. 10 minutes is 10 minutes. You touch the blanket. You don't touch Marie's hair. It feels like a line you should not cross. Tomorrow again, you say. She shows you her bare teeth and makes it look like a grin. Back on Orchard, the snow is fatter now, sticking to your eyebrows, making everyone look like someone's grandfather. A man you don't know stands at the corner. He is too clean for this block. His collar is too stiff. Tommy tugs your sleeve. Pinkerton, he says without moving his lips. You drift toward the women on the stoop like you belong there. The man watches doors like he is reading names through wood. The women start talking too loud about babies and bread and a cousin's wedding that never happened. The noise is a cloud. It is cover. A boy slips out a side alley and runs down the block with a bundle of papers under his shirt. The man in the stiff collar hesitates, steps the other way, decides the wrong thing. He disappears into the fog of other streets. The women on the stoop stop talking all at once. One of them winks at you like you have been added to her list now. You go home to a room that is not warm enough and smells like cabbage and linen and effort. Papa is at the table with his hands over a chipped cup. The cup hides whether there is anything in it. His eyes are red-rimmed in a way that has nothing to do with tears. "No work tonight," he says, without looking at you. It sounds like both good news and bad. "Doc had a dispute," he adds. "Men argued with the gang boss. No load, no pay." Ma's mouth tightens and softens at the same time. "Eat," she says to all of you, "because the soup is soup and it is here, and we will not insult the day by letting it cool." Marco wants news. He lives on it like it's food. You tell him the good part: soup kitchens, singing, the old woman, the snow that made the horses slow down. You do not tell him the baton over your head, the boy on the cobbles with blood on his eyebrow, the way the rider looked down at you like a nail he was deciding whether to hammer. Anna asks if Marie is okay. You tell her Marie asked for bread. That is the same as okay for tonight, after dinner. Ma mixes herbs in a bowl, carefully, like she is adding numbers that must equal a life. "For Stefan," she says, "and for Mrs. Goldstein's baby, you'll take both." Now, she says. Nights are longer when you're hurting. Outside, the snow hush is trying to make you believe the city is kind. That is not true, but it is useful. You go toward 5 Points because that is where Stefan is, and because there is no other way to him. The streets lean differently over there. Even the snowflakes seem more tired. Men you do not know lean in doorways with the easy lean of men who don't work mornings. A woman in a dress too thin for any season smokes like the cigarette is the only warm thing left to her. On the second floor, a door is half open. A boy younger than you sits on the hall floor with a bowl in his lap. He is eating like he is afraid someone will take it, and also afraid someone will not. You nod at him. He nods back, to people who understand the math of bowls. Stefan's room is bright from one crooked lamp. His mother's eyes are the same grey as the rain that comes in April and ruins laundry day. The foot is worse. You know that without looking long. The smell tells you. You hand over the herbs. You hand over the words your mother taught you to say with them. Do this, heat this. Do not wait if the fever climbs. Go to the hospital even. If pride hates it. Tomorrow I stand with you, Stefan says from the mattress. Because pride has ears and talks. You sit with us, you say. You sit with us or you won't stand again at all. He tries to joke, but the pain smudges his smile. Bossy, he says. From Ma, you say, and he nods, which is the same as agreeing. Back out on the stairs, you hear boots that want to be loud and are trying not to be. 3 men. One laughs without joy. 3rd floor, he says. That's the union woman, yeah. You move without thinking, because if you think you will freeze, you take the back steps down and run across the alley to the other stair. You thump up and bang on a door with the code the old woman made up in the snow. 2 fast, 1 slow. The door opens a crack. Eyes, then wider. They're coming, you say, stairs. Inside the room smells like coffee and paper and stubborn. The old woman is there, calm as rope. 2 younger men grab the crate of pamphlets and hide it under the sink. Someone slides a rug over a loose board. Someone lifts the mattress and hides 3 little flags the church ladies sewed this afternoon. The old woman tightens her shawl and sits in a chair by the window like any other tired neighbor. There is a knock that isn't a knock, it is a threat. The door opens before anyone answers. The men walk in like they own the floor. They do not. Evening, the first one says. His coat is too clean for 5 points. We're checking on a report of trouble. Trouble is always checking. On me, the old woman says, and the way she says, it makes one of the men smile against his will. Name. The first man says, Mary, she says. Last name, you don't need it, she says, and looks at him until he looks away. The other men rifle nothing because there is nothing to rifle. The crate is a sink now. The flags are a bed. The rug is a rug. The men leave with the smell of their boots. The old woman exhales in a way that tells you she only breathes full when she is alone. She pats your arm. You're quick, she says. Not quick enough for everything. You say nobody is, she says. That's why we do it together. You walk home with the lesson walking beside you like a person. On Broom Street, a newsboy with no hat and a voice too big for his chest barks headlines. He sees you watching and squares up like a man with a stage. Extra. Strike at Anderson. Governor promises inquiry. He grins. We had one of our own last summer. Newsies fought for a penny more. Can you believe? He laughs like a cough. We won some, lost some. That's the city. You want a paper. I got soup, you say, and hand him half a loaf you were saving for home. He looks at it like it's gold. He tears it in two and hands you back a piece. Trade, he says. The snow puts white on both your heads. You are two princes, and the kingdom is a sidewalk. Upstairs, the lamp burns low like a heartbeat. Ma takes one look at your face and the snow on your shoulders and knows enough not to ask the kind of questions that turn story into pain. Papa sits still with that dockyard stillness. He doesn't speak for a while. Then he says, simple and hard, tomorrow. Tomorrow, you say. He nods once, like a man taking a number in a long line. You stretch out on the corn husk bed. The mattress crackles. Marco steals the blanket. Anna nestles into the curve of you like she was poured there. You close your eyes and see a horse's eye instead. You see Marie's cup in her hand and the way she smiled with no strength and all fire. You see Stefan's foot and wish your hands were bigger than herbs. You hear the old woman's voice. We keep us somewhere down the block. A fiddle tries a tune. It sounds like hunger pretending to be joy. You almost smile. You almost sleep. Then the hallway fills with a smell you know even though you've never named it before. Hot metal. Old dust waking up fast. Someone coughs, a cough that is not a sickness cough. It is an alarm. Then the word hits the door like a fist, fire. It is not a story word. It is a mouthful of smoke word. The building shifts around you as people wake into panic. Feet thump, a baby wails. The air changes shape. Ma is up already. She moves like she has practiced this in her head 100 times. She puts coats on children and hope on faces. Papa is at the door. The door is hot. He swears in a voice you have never heard him use. He opens it anyway with his shoulder, fast and careful at the same time. You grab Anna. Marco grabs the blanket. Because he is 9, and that is what a 9-year-old thinks to grab. The hallway is a tunnel of smoke. You taste old paint and fear. Someone down the stairs is praying loud like a rope thrown upward. Someone above you screams all the names they know. You do not think about tomorrow now. You do not think about the strike. You think about the stair that is rotten and how many steps to the landing and the window at the end of the hall that never opens unless you push it with both hands. You think about how everything you love is inside your arms and how Your arms are not big enough for all of it. Stay low, Ma orders, and the words turn you into a soldier. You go to your knees, you crawl, you breathe through the wet of your sleeve and pretend it helps because pretending also helps. The smoke claws your eyes. You keep going. The building has been trying to kill you in small ways for years. Tonight, it tries to do it fast. Behind you, someone bangs on Mr. O'Brien's door, and the banging turns into breaking, and the breaking turns into a woman dragging a man who is more alcohol than person. And you keep moving because you cannot carry them too. Not tonight. Not yet. The stairwell opens like a mouth. You look down and see orange where there should be black. You look up and see darkness that smells like burning rope. The choice is not a choice. Back window, Papa says. Fire escape. Fire. Escape. Two words that are a ladder if the ladder is there and not stuck and not iced and not broken. Two words that are a promise cities make when they feel guilty. You turn, you go. The window is there. It is stuck, of course. Everything important is stuck in this building. Papa slams his shoulder. The wood complains. He slams again. The sash gives with a crack that sounds like victory. Cold night air slaps. Your face, you have never loved the cold. You love it now, outside. The iron ladder waits with a skin of ice and a promise of down. People are already moving on it, hands, feet, children in sacks of blankets, old men with tears you can see in the snow light. Ma goes first, testing every step like she is reading a sentence she has to get right. Anna after her, small and brave. You pass Anna down like she is a loaf of bread, and your hands are the only hands left in the world. Marco goes next, clutching the stupid blanket like a trophy. You want to yell at him, and you also want to kiss his head for being 9 and alive. You glance back into the room. The lamp is still lit on the table, stubborn little flame. You hate it for a second, then you blow it out, and that feels like saving something, too. Sirens in the distance, they sound like church bells trying to run. The line of neighbors on the fire escape moves slow and careful. Somewhere above, wood screams. Somewhere below, someone falls and the sound stops wrong. You shut that part of your head. You climb, you descend. You count rungs and you don't miscount, because there is no second try. Street level smells like whores and smoke and the kind of fear that tastes like pennies. The crowd opens and closes and carries you toward the curb. A fireman with a mustache that could keep you warm by itself shouts orders that turn into action. Men hold a canvas and practice catching lives. Women press blankets on wet shoulders. Children cry because crying is proof. You stand there, shaking, holding Anna, touching Marco's shoulder every 6 seconds to make sure he is still a shoulder. Ma wraps all of you in her arms and makes your family into one thing again. Papa coughs the fire out of his lungs and looks at the building like it insulted his mother. Across the street, you see the old woman with the rope hands, counting heads like beads. She nods when she gets to 4 for your family. She moves on. She is the only one you know who can do math under smoke. The flames lick out the top like a mouth that found oxygen. Snow lands on them and turns to steam, and the air becomes a ghost story. Someone is missing. You hear the name, you know the name. You take a step toward the door that is now a mouth of fire, and a man in a helmet pushes you back without looking because he has done this math and it says no. You hold the children tighter. You find Ma's hand. You find Papa's sleeve. You find your breath. It comes back like a stray. Above everything, the mill chimney still pours its black. The machines keep chewing. The city keeps being the city. But here, on this curb, in this snow, with this smoke in your hair, you feel something else, too. The way a neighborhood turns into a living thing when it has to. The way people wake themselves and each other. The way the word fire reaches. The exact right heart. You think, wildly and exactly, of the strike, of the line, of the Pinkertons and the horses and the soup, of Marie in her bed, of Stefan on his mattress, of the boy Newsy breaking a loaf in half, with you like kings. You think, this is all the same fight. A beam falls. The crowd gasps. The fire eats the sound. You do not sleep tonight. Nobody does. The night is a long hallway, and you walk it with everyone else. Dawn is somewhere on the other side, and you promise it something simple in your head. Tomorrow again, even after this. Especially after this, the whistle will try to call you in the morning. The fire called first. Ashes and Ledger's dawn is grey and guilty. It creeps over Orchard Street like it knows what it did last night and is trying to look innocent. The tenement smoulders wood hissing where snow kisses it, smoke curled into the cold like a bad thought that won't blow away. Your clothes smell like a campfire that ate a house. Your mouth tastes like pennies and soot. Nobody really slept. People leaned against walls, against each other, against the idea of morning. When the fire wagons finally clanged off and the crowd thinned to the ones with nowhere else to go, you and your family slid back upstairs to a room that is still technically your room. The window is open to chase the stink. The cornhusk mattress is damp along one side where a bucket slopped. The lamp is dark, a little moon snuffed out. You touch the table like it might have learnt your handprint in the night and could teach it back to you. Ma boils water, because that is what you do when there is nothing else to do. Papa sits, the cup in his hands more symbol than drink. Marco is a knot of blanket and elbows on the floor. Anna is under your coat, a small bird who decided to be human for your sake. What now? You ask the room, and the room answers with the sound of other rooms. Coughs, soft crying. Someone laughing too hard because, if it isn't funny, you might fall apart. Now is rent day. You hear him before you see him. The landlord's man, shoes to clean for these stairs, voice pitched to carry. Assessing damages, he says, like smoke listens to paperwork. He knocks on doors without waiting. When he reaches yours, he looks around with the practiced sorrow of a man comparing numbers in his head. Repairs cost money, he says, and the word repairs falls in your soup like a cinder. The rent will reflect. The rent already reflects, Ma says, not angry. Something worse tired of being polite to a math that hates you. We paid. For a roof that burns. For a stair that breaks. For a window that opens with a prayer. The man's smile wants to apologize for him. His eyes don't. There will be an increase while Papa stands. Just stands. Tired, unshaven, still streaked with smoke. The landlord's man takes a step back like a sane person who has seen a winter river swell and knows when to not put a foot in. I will tell Mr. Harris you have concerns, he says. You have 3 days. 3 days for what? You ask to be in arrears, he says. As if the syllables were a staircase you could climb to a better life. He leaves numbers behind him like a smell. Eat Ma says. That is always the answer that buys you time to find another answer. On the landing, the old woman with the rope hands runs an inventory with her eyes. She makes notes in a little book that looks older than any of you. O'Brien family to my sisters with the baby, she says. Kowalskis can share with Goldsteins this week. Ward meeting at 10 at the settlement. Breadline opens early. Orders are comfort because they disguise themselves as plans. Settlement, you ask. Henry Street, she says. Nurses with clean hands and heads that aren't soft. You bring your mother. Your father, if he can bear being told to lie. Down, you nod. She nods back. That's a contract. Outside, the street is a library of bad news words written in ash and footprints. Still, there's coffee at the corner, in a pot big enough to be hope, poured by a woman with shoulders like a dock crane. She won't take pennies from anyone who smells like smoke. That is half the block. Nearby, the newsie from last night stands. On a crate that used to be oranges and now is a stage. Extra. Tenement, fire on orchard. City promises inquiry. His voice cracks on promises, like it's recognizing a word with too many vowels and not enough backbone. He catches your eye, tips his cap, bites bread like he forgave you for giving it to him. You turn down Henry Street, where the settlement house stands like the idea of a clean shirt made into brick. Inside is warm without being fancy. There are posters on the walls about washing hands and boiling milk, drawings of lungs, and a little boy with a bar of soap. He looks too happy to be real, which makes him a useful picture anyway. The hallway smells of starch and eucalyptus, a scent that says someone here believes in breathing. A nurse with a square face and a square jaw meets you without looking surprised to see who you are. Smoke? She asks. Yes, Ma says. Sit, the nurse says. And a word that small shouldn't carry this much authority, but it does. She looks at your eyes, peels down your lower lid, presses fingers under your jaw where the glands gossip. She checks Anna's chest with an ear, listening to the city in tiny lungs. Hot tea with honey, she says. Here is bread. Here is a blanket with edges. She says it like she is dealing out cards, and you have a hand now. She turns to Papa, who is trying to be invisible in a chair. You're next, he starts. With the man words, I'm fine. There are others. You are next, she repeats, kind but immovable. He looks at Ma. Ma nods. He sits still while the nurse listens to the pipes inside him. If you cough red, you come back, she says. No brave. He nods like he wishes brave were a potion and not a habit. How much? Ma asks, counting invisible coins with her eyebrows. The nurse's mouth does a thing that is not quite a smile today. You pay me by bringing your neighbor with the baby, the one who thinks fever is a moral failing. We will, Ma says. Deals everywhere, all day. The good kind for once. In the next room, a woman with a ledger is teaching kids to write their names in English and in the language they hear when they dream. The chalk squeaks, the letters form. Marco watches with the hunger that is not stomach. You want him in that chair. You want him to spend an afternoon tasting words that don't punch back. School, you say to Ma. Work, she says. The collision happens in her eyes. She files it in the cabinet labeled later. The whole neighborhood has that cabinet. Outside, a man in a soft hat and a hard smile steps out of a doorway like he owns the sidewalk. You recognize the type before you've met the man. Tammany Hawes' little fingers, ward healers with small gifts and long receipts. Heard about the fire, he says. Terrible, terrible. His accent is the city itself. He hands Ma a sack. Like the one's flour comes in, only this one has coffee and a candle and a paper with a name on it. From Mr. Murphy, he says, as if Mr. Murphy were a god you were supposed to burn sage for. Just remember who's there when City Hall drags its feet. What's the paper, you ask? A reminder, he says. Primary's this. Spring, vote right. We keep the help coming. Vote wrong, well. He spreads his hands as if gravity would begin to fail. Oh, and tell the boys at Anderson to keep their heads down. No use getting mashed, is there? The smile sharpens. He tips the hat. He goes. Garbage with a ribbon, Ma says when he's gone. But it's coffee, Papa says, honest to a fault. You take both truths home. That is what today is, carrying two truths without dropping either. By midday, you smell like smoke and onions, and the kind of tired that has texture it would be. Easy to go home and sit on the floor and let the day roll over you. That's exactly why you don't. The line is calling, not a whistle. A memory of being a person in public and not just a body near a machine. You and Tommy meet at the corner, like you arranged it with the air. His shoulder is wrapped, a band of cloth that makes him look older and younger at once. You look like a chimney sweep, he says. You look like a present somebody dropped. You say back at it, he asks. Back at it, you say. The mill is a bruise on the skyline. The crowd is smaller than yesterday, that's what fires do. They eat people's energy who weren't even in the building. But the old woman is there. Hands like rope, voices like nails. The horses are not. The deputy is. The Pinkertons are leaning as if they were born tilted. Harrison comes out with someone new, a man with spectacles and a city pin in his lapel. Inspector, people whisper, and the word passes like a shiver. He carries a clipboard as if paper could make the looms less hungry. He clears his throat. We've had reports, he begins, and the reports are alive and standing in front of him, not paper at all. Come inside. The old woman says, like she's inviting him to tea with a wolf. Bring your eyes. There is a scuffle at the door, then a concession. The inspector, to foreman, to workers as witnesses. And this is the part that matters: a reporter with a notebook and a photographer with his lightning box. You are not in that group. You are 12 and smoke-streaked and a kid. You stay in the line, holding it like an end of rope. Time does strange math. People talk low. The deputy counts his men again. A woman hums a lullaby without a baby to make. Herself less scared. When the door opens again, the inspector's face is the face men wear when numbers don't match. The photographer has powder on his cheek and a grin he's trying to hide. The reporter's pencil is a weapon. Safety The inspector says, like he is not about to put his career under the wheel. Immediate, non-negotiable. He rattles them like nails into pine. Guards on belts. Emergency stops that don't require 4 men and a crowbar. No children under. He hesitates. Looks at you. Decides 14. Effective at once. The crowds. Breath becomes sound. You feel your ribs grow 3 sizes. Harrison's mouth tightens. His eyes do math you cannot see. We will comply as feasible, he says. As ordered, the inspector says, and for a second you believe in paper. Harrison sees that belief and hates it. The Pinkerton's smile thins. A paper cut. It doesn't fix rent. It doesn't fix hunger. It doesn't pull last night's heat back into the walls or turn smoke into something you can spend, but it is a shape of better. It is a wedge you can work with. The line does not erupt. It doesn't have strength for eruption. It does something quieter, which in some ways is bigger. It holds. It tightens where it was loose. It breathes together. It lets the inspector pass without spitting on his shoes, because you might need him again. It lets Harrison pass without throwing rocks, because the day is long and you have bread to deliver later and a girl in a hospital to make laugh. You take the long way home, past the church basement. The pots are still going. New faces have their names written on paper, pinned to their coats, because sometimes help needs to learn you fast. You carry 2 bowls to Mrs. Goldstein and to the Kowalskis, who are sharing a bed because the other one got wet or burned or both. In your room, the window is still open to memory. Ma has a pot going that turns cabbage into something that smells like food. Papa is scraping soot off the lamp chimney with the patience of prayer. Anna has arranged 3 buttons on the floor like they are people. This one's Marie, she says, and puts a bit of string around that one's waist like a belt, like a get-well charm. There's a knock. Not the landlord, not the ward healer. The nurse from Henry Street stands there with a bundle. Blankets for those who slept near fire, she says, handing over with edges that scream dignity. And for the boy, she nods at Marco. Lessons tomorrow afternoon, if he can be spared. Reading, writing, arithmetic. She spells it like a spell. He can be spared, Ma says, surprising both you and herself. Marco's face opens like a window that finally slid free. He looks at you as if you just shoved the sash with both hands. After supper, you walk to the hospital with a heel of bread hidden like a jewel. The nurse lets you in with her eyes. Marie is awake, hair braided like she's ready to punch a day. In the throat, you smell like a campfire, she says. Fashion, you say you hear. She asks, about the inspector. You ask back, and the guards and the 14. She asks, and when you nod, she laughs without moving anything that hurts. Paper with teeth, she says, imagine. Tomorrow again, you say automatically. Tomorrow again, she echoes, then adds, and the day after, Joey, that's how the future gets made. Not with one loud thing, with 1,000 small stubborns. You walk home under a sky that is pretending to be clean. The mill chimneys still chews the dark, but the smoke looks a fraction less smug. The newsy waves. A late edition you can't afford. The old woman on the stoop counts the faces coming and going like a ledger you trust. Upstairs, Papa trims the lamp wick and it burns steady. Ma sets the new blankets on the cornhusk mattress and they look like a crown on a scarecrow, and that's fine because kings are invented, too. Marco practices an A in the air with his finger and it looks like a mountain. Anna disappears under the blanket and reappears like a magician. You lie down and the mattress crackles and the smell of smoke yields, just a little, to the smell of clean wool. Somewhere a fiddle finds a tune that is actually happy this time. You let yourself believe the inspector will mean what he said, that a guard will bite a belt before a sleeve does, that a door will open for a child who should be in a classroom instead of under a loom. You let yourself believe the rent man can wait 3 days and find a softer number. You let yourself believe the ward healer will choke on his own grin. You let yourself believe Stefan will keep his foot, that Marie will leave the hospital with her same sharp mouth, that the old woman will live forever out of spite. And you hold the biggest belief with both hands like it's the last bread in the city, that you can wake tomorrow and be a person again, in public with other people, and that will count. The whistle will still scream in the morning. You won't answer it with a time card. You'll answer it with a line, with a bowl, with a blanket edge, with a letter Marco writes on real paper soon enough. With 1,000 small stubborns, the shape-up river is a different kind of factory. It makes cold and money and widows. You learn this before the sun does, walking beside your father in a dark that tastes like iron. It's not even morning yet. It's the hour the night leaves and the day hasn't claimed. The cobbles pitch you forward. Your father's steps are careful, because careful is a habit you don't unlearn when the rent is due. Stay close, he says, and you do. He doesn't reach for your hand, men. On the docks don't have sons that young. Not here, but he shortens his stride the way men do when they remember their boys used to be small. The water shows first by smell, tar and brine and wood that has travelled farther than you ever will if the city has its way. Then the shapes come, ribs of ships, cranes like praying mantises, masts and booms drawn in ink against a sky that is trying on grey. Lamps sway on long arms, rope talks in creaks. Somewhere a bell mutters. The crowd thickens at the pierhead, men in caps and coats, men without coats, men with hooks hanging off belts like the tail of some hard animal. Longshoremen, you've heard the word your whole life and never stood inside it. They gather in a shape that looks like a line until the foreman arrives and reminds everyone this is not a line. This is a favor. The foreman is a neat man in a neat hat. He carries a clipboard because power loves paper. Behind him, the hiring boss gang boss Jews, a matchstick, and stares like he's reading prices written on faces. You can tell who worked yesterday by the way they stand. Bodies that learned a lesson and haven't yet forgotten it. The shape-up begins. No whistle. No fairness. The boss points with his jaw, with his chin, with the corner of his mouth. You, not you. Men lean forward, trying to become the kind of height that gets picked. A few tuck-folded bills into their handshake, a small tax that buys the privilege of starving slower. Your father doesn't move like that. He holds his cap in both hands and waits. He has a dignity that looks like stubbornness from the wrong angle. Enzo, the boss says, finally, like it's an insult he can tolerate today. He doesn't look at your father when he says it. He looks over your father's shoulder at the next favor. Your father nods. That's all. He doesn't smile. He doesn't thank. He steps forward, and the men who didn't get picked step back and don't look at him. There's a shame here, and it moves around the circle, shares itself out. Like bread, why am I here? You ask, because asking costs less than not knowing. Errand boy, your father says, if the boss wants a message, if we need a tool, if I need you to run to Henry Street for a nurse. He says the last part like a joke he hopes never gets. Told. Workers peel into gang's aid, 10 men to a hatch. They walk with the same speed people use, carrying a full bowl. Down into the hold, up the skid, across the plank, down to the pier. The same loop 100,000 times. The ship today is a belly full of sack sugar. The foreman says, like he named a child. You imagine it coming apart, sweetness turned into a white storm that would make the dock a cake and the men a mess. You picture the newspaper headline, absurd and beautiful, and then you picture a man under a ton of pretty death. You stop picturing. The hold is breathless. The air is syrup. Men disappear into the square mouth like bread into a machine. A winch rattles. A boom squeals. The sling lifts a net of sacks hugging each other for dear life. Fan swings onto the pier. Men with hooks catch it, spin it, land it on a truck bed with the precision of magicians who hate applause. Keep your feet, your father says, and your eyes on the rope. You keep both where he says. Your father's face changes when he works. The lines, you know, fold deeper. His mouth goes smaller. He wears his body like borrowed armor. He moves well, though bends, lifts, turns his. Tired, wrapped in competence. This is not heroism. This is skill scarred into muscle, not the kind you put on a poster, the kind that keeps people fed. You run the first errand early. A pin has popped from a shackle. The gang boss yells, and the word pin suddenly means a man's life. You sprint to the tool shed, past a stack of lumber that smells like a forest someone broke down into math, past a kid your age selling cigarettes from a box, past a man throwing dice like prayer. The shed keeper is a philosopher of rust. He hands you a bag of pins and a sentence. Don't drop 'em, you don't. Back at the hatch, the sling descends again, obedient as a trained animal. Your father nods at the pin and nods at you, because both of you did your parts. The nod is small. It's everything. The dock is a mouth for news. Men talk around the side of their work, half sentences, losing subject or verb to the boom's squeal. You hear about your mill without trying. 2. Inspector said guards. Pinkertons, not happy. Kids, out front in the snow. You stand straighter for a second, and then remember you are not here for straight. You are here for quick. Brother, a man says to your father, because the docks invent family when it helps. You hear, Tammany will feed 100 families. On Sunday, church hall. Names already on a list. He doesn't say who writes the list or what the names. Oh, names already on a list. Your father repeats softly. Lists everywhere. Some save, some eat. You learn the vocabulary fast because vocabulary is survival. Winch, dog, chock, sling, bite. You learn that a widowmaker is anything heavy that pretends it isn't. You learn to look up whenever anyone else does. You learn that coffee handed across a plank tastes better than coffee anywhere in the city. You learn that laughter happens here too, even at this hour, even at this temperature, because if men don't laugh, they rust. The boss sends you to the hiring shack with a slip of paper. The shack has a stove. It has a calendar with a lady whose dress is missing more fabric than makes sense in January. It has a desk with a ledger heavier than the truth. The clerk licks a pencil and writes your father's name and a number that is not a wage yet, only a promise. You have learned what promises are worth. Still, your chest lifts a little. Ink is better than air. On the way back, you pass a man being led off between two others. He's walking, but his knees don't believe it. Drunk, somebody says. You smell him. You smell more than drink on him. You smell the night you fled through smoke. You pretend not to. By 10 daylight is real. The gulls remember they own the sky and commence yelling. The ships wake all the way. The city shows itself. Like a family portrait, beloved, crowded. The foreman calls a short break, and it feels like a debt paid back wrong. You hand your father a heel of bread, and the face he makes is gratitude disguised as chewing. He tears it and gives you half. Men watch the exchange and do their own small math. That's a good man. He gives the kid half. You see, he says, gesturing at the ship and the river and the slow beast of the city. Everything moves. Nothing stays where it is. Not sacks, not money, not luck. Not laws, you say, thinking of the inspector and his clipboard with teeth. He looks at you sideways. He has gotten used to you coming home with other people's words. Maybe not laws, he says, but men like to prove they can stand still against the river, and the river likes to prove it can move them. The break ends because breaks are not supposed to be long enough for philosophy. Back to the loop, into the hold, out of the truck, up the skid, down the skid. A rhythm like the mill with fewer children and heavier consequences. You miss the line outside Anderson even as you do not miss the machine's teeth. Your body knows work's shape now. It hates idleness in the way a horse hates a fly. The accident is small and large, which is how accidents work. A sling shifts as it clears the combing. One sack tears enough to spit sugar like sudden weather. The net tilts, the load slides. A man steps wrong to avoid white rain and his foot finds nothing. In the half-second, your brain becomes only watching. Your father moves, not thinking, not heroic, just the way some men move when time misbehaves. He grabs the man's coat and the man grabs your father's wrist and the sling kisses. The edge of the hatch and the boom jerks and then everything holds. A breath, too. The load settles onto the deck with a thud that shakes teeth. There is a sound your father makes then, deep and old. The noise men push down so their skin doesn't hear it. He lets go of the man. The man says a prayer that forgets to name God. The foreman swears in a way that is surprisingly gentle. Somebody laughs the wrong laugh and gets punched right. The world starts again. Your father's wrist is red, where fingers clamped. He flexes it. He flexes his jaw. He finds your eyes. Run to Henry Street, he says. Tell them we need bandage. And salve at Pier 17. Say Enzo asked, they'll know. You run because running is easier than having just watched the almost that was. The street is brighter now, which only makes the cold more honest. The settlement house opens its door like houses should. A nurse different from the square-jawed one. This one narrow and swift fills a bag with bandage, salve, a bottle of brown liquid that looks like medicine and smells like courage. For the docks, she says, like she's been waiting for you to say it. Back at the pier, your father is pretending to work with a wrist that doesn't want to. The nurse washes it in the brown, and your father swears in 2 languages and then says thank you. Like she pulled him out of a river. She probably did. She wraps him. He flexes. The wrist remembers loyalty. The gang returns to its loop. Around noon, the hiring boss strolls the line, stopping here and there to adjust nothing. He eyes your father's wrap the way a butcher eyes. A bruised apple. You finish the day, he says. It isn't a question. Tomorrow see how you feel. The promise of work turns into a riddle you don't solve until you are hungry. At the lunch bell, the men don't leave. They sit on bollards, on sacks, on the ground. Food appears from pockets and from nowhere. The talk turns from cargo to politics, which on the docks is not a change of subject so much as a different verse. Islas forming in Brooklyn, A. Man says the International Longshoremen's Association, words you heard like thunder distant. Maybe a local here. The older men snort, not because they disagree, but because they remember what happens to men who believe in hope at the waterline. Kids out at Anderson, your father says, touching the message to the talk like a coal to kindling. Heads turn toward you. You are suddenly the boy who knows the story. You tell it short, simple, no poetry, because poetry isn't lunch. The old woman with rope hands, the inspector, the camera flash, the snow, the horses, the fact that you are going back this afternoon because tomorrow again turns into today still, unless you go. A man you don't know, Irish eyes, tired, and kind hands you part of his sandwich. For your line, he says, give it to the one who looks like she needs to hit somebody. Marie, you say before you can stop yourself. Then you smile, because it hurts less to say her name with bread in your hand. Afternoon leans. the work keeps. The ledger in the shack grows its numbers in a tidy hand. You realize the ledger doesn't measure what got done. It measures what can be paid and still leave the ship owners fat. You realize you've been measuring your days wrong. Not hours, not pennies, but inches of people shaved off, one edge at a time. The shape up at dusk is shorter than the one at dawn. A few men stay hoping for night work. Most drift away with their shoulders negotiating against gravity. The foreman posts a list for tomorrow's first call. Your father scans it and finds his name at the bottom, as if the ink was tired by the time it arrived at him. On the walk home, your father is quiet. Quiet as stone. You fill it with talking because kids think words are a bridge you can build over anything if you lay them fast enough. You tell him about the inspector again, about the nurse promising lessons for Marco, about the blankets with edges. You tell him about Tammany sack coffee and a candle and a vote I owe you, and you see the way his mouth folds. Not at the food, at the price, at Orchard. The building looks smaller somehow, like fire shrank its confidence. The old woman is there on the stoop because she is always exactly where a neighborhood needs a spine. She lifts a chin at you. Pick it in 1 hour, she says. Soup first. Sugar for Marie if you've got any left of that doc. Sugar. You say, and you realize your coat smells like it. You had forgotten. The men who caught the torn sack kept sweeping it into their hands when the foreman wasn't looking. The way men rescue small joys during big labor. You don't have a handful, but you have a sweetness under your nails. You bring your fingers to your tongue. It's ridiculous and perfect. You laugh out loud, a sound that makes Ma appear in the doorway like she was called. Where were you? She asks, and you realize you didn't tell her because if you asked, she would have said no. The river, you say with Papa. She looks at Papa's wrist. He holds it up like a guilty thing turned honest. We worked, he says. Eat, she says. Because that's her answer to endings and beginnings. Soup, bread, a slice of something that might be meat or might be a miracle. Marco draws letters on a scrap with a pencil the nurse gave him. He makes the A like a mountain again, and this time he climbs it with his eyes. Anna listens to your doc story with her head tipped like a bird, listening for worms. Tomorrow, Papa asks, eyes on you, not on the bowl. Line, you say, and Henry Street. With Marco after lessons. Papa nods. It isn't permission. It's an admission. The river can't have all his boy. The machines can't, either. You take the Irishman's sandwich half to the hospital. The nurse lets you slip past with a glance that says, I am your equal in mischief. Marie is propped with pillows, like a queen in a room that doesn't know from royalty. You produce the sandwich like a magician producing a coin. Doc gift, you say. She eyes it like a wolf who studied table manners for fun. I'll write them a thank you, she says, and then bites it like she never learned letters. You tell her about the inspector again, and she rolls her eyes. Don't get religious about men with clipboards, she says, but do keep them coming. You tell her about the shape-up, and she calls the hiring boss something in Irish that sounds like a chair breaking. She tells you the nurse says tomorrow she can sit up longer. Tomorrow again, she adds, and it's starting to sound like a song. On the way back, the picket is already humming. Not as big as yesterday, bigger than fear would like. The deputy is there measuring his baton against the crowd. The Pinkertons are there measuring you against their notebooks. Harrison is there measuring everything against money. The old woman is there measuring none of them against anything because she already knows. You take your place in the line, shoulder to shoulder, the day fitting into the shape of your body, as if this was what your bones were for. Beside you, Tommy raises his wrapped arm in a small salute. On your other side, a woman you don't know hums a lullaby for a baby who isn't here and might never be. Across the street, a priest watches like a man who believes in winter but prays for spring. You think of the river and the mill and the tenement, and the settlement house and the hospital and the soup and the ledger and the list, and the sack that burst and the men who caught sweetness like thieves. You think of your father's wrist and how he said everything moves. You think of how today you moved between worlds, between fights, between the part of the city that lifts and the part that pushes. The whistle at Anderson goes off like it always does, only now it sounds a little less like a command and a little more like a bad habit the city is trying to quit. Tomorrow again, you say to nobody and everybody. Tomorrow again, the line answers. The river breathes. The city answers. Somewhere in the night, a ship's horn cries long, low, patient. It sounds like a promise you might actually be able to keep. Blackboards and blacklist morning wears a thin gold edge, like a coin rubbed almost smooth. You're up before the whistle, which still feels new. Habit wants to pull you to Anderson's door. Choice threads a different path through the day. Eat, Ma says, handing you the heel she saved back out of last night. Then take your brother. Marco stands straighter than bread deserves. He scrubbed the sleep off his face like it was a stain. He's got the pencil from the settlement clutched like a tool and a promise. Henry Street looks like a clean thought someone built out of brick. Inside, the halls smell of starch and lemon. A nurse teacher in a blue dress moves with the glide of someone who has made peace with hurry. She smiles at children as if they were solutions and not problems, names. She asks, Marco. Your brother says, too loud, like names can get lost if you don't nail them down. And Joey, but he's just dropping me he has. Errands. The teacher says, like she's met 1,000 errands and knows which ones matter. We'll have him by noon, she promises Ma without looking, like mothers. Travel with you invisibly. She puts Marco in a room that has blackboards on 2 walls and a map of the world that looks wrong to your eyes. Too many blues where there should be streets. Children repeat letters like prayer. Chalk squeaks. Hope makes a small, brave noise. You stay long enough to see Marco's hand make an A that could hold a roof. He looks at it like a boy who found a door. Your chest does a strange thing. Grows and hurts at the same time. Go, he says, flicking his eyes toward the door, the way men do when they want other men to believe they're not soft. I'm busy. You leave laughing softer than he deserves. On Orchard, the city is practicing. Daylight. Shopkeepers sweep stoops, as if pushing away bad luck. The old woman with rope, hands married to some, mother to others, spine to all, has a card table that used to be a door. On it, a tower of handbills. English on one side, she says, thumbing a stack. Yiddish and Italian on the other. Hand. Them to people with a pulse. You take a fistful, feeling important in your fingers. The paper says what the mouths have been saying. Shorter hours. Guards that bite belts, pay for injury, school for small ones, no blacklist. The word blacklist sits like a nail in the wood. You've heard it all your life in whispers. Today it's ink, blacklists, you ask. They're real and not just stories to scare kids. Mary snorts like a horse that respects only real. Fences, lists are the city's true religion, she says. Landlords keep them. Bosses keep them. Politicians sleep with them under their pillows. Don't give them yours. Make your own. You hand leaflets to women with babies and men with hands that look like rope. You tuck them under bread on stoops. You slide one into the pocket of the ward healer's coat when he turns to wink at a girl too young for winks. He pats the place. Like a tick landed there. You smile without teeth and keep walking down by the mill. The front door has a hinge of men Pinkertons leaning like their own gravity. A deputy trying out his baton on his palm to foremen whose mouths were set to. Mean as boys and got stuck. There's hammering inside, a sound you're not used to hearing unless something's broken. You catch a glimpse through the door carpenter's bolting boards over belts, shining curves of new guards that promise not to be theatre. A mechanic wipes his hands on a rag and looks almost human when he thinks nobody's watching. Harrison comes to the threshold like a man who knows he has to show the theatre to the cheap seats. Compliance underway, he says to nobody, and the reporter who is somehow always there anyway. He says it like a man showing a widow he installed a lock after the burglar left. Then he tacks on the rest like a knife to offset interruptions. Quotas increase by 10%. Productivity must pay for safety. You can feel the line's breath turn into a growl. Paper with teeth, Marie said. Paper also has teeth that bite both ways. Mary is there before the sound becomes a move. We don't pay for not being mangled, she says, voice level as a carpenter's bubble. You pay what the law and God already owed. The deputy's baton pauses mid-tap. The Pinkertons write nothing and everything. You hold the handbills tighter so they don't fly like doves when you want hawks today at mid-morning Henry Streets. Door spits Marco back out, hair full of chalk, eyes full of weather. He waves a slate the size of his ribs. On it, letters, shy and proud. Look, he says. He's written your name. Not Joey, Yepper, the one that fits inside home. The spelling is almost right. He has given you back a piece you sometimes hide. Good, you say. And your throat means it more than your mouth can. Teacher says, if I come afternoons, I can catch up fast, he adds, like it's a race and he finally found the track. Teachers. Right, you say. And Ma nods when you say it, which means she was already there. Noon brings soup and news. The woman in the kerchief from the next building says men in nice coats went door to door late, looking for Mary, she says, and her mouth twists, as if we'd sell our mother for coins. The men asked about names. The men took notes. The men said words like sedition and agitation and public nuisance in a tone that makes those words sound like you asked politely for air. Tonight, Mary says, she isn't smiling. They'll come with paper in their hands to make it look holy. What do we do? You ask. Because sometimes asking is not weakness. It is recruitment. Same as fire, she says. 2 knocks for Pinkertons. 3 for police. Lamps in the window when you move somebody and hide the paper that matters. Paper. You look at Marco's slate, at the handbills, at the inspectors. Orders, at the ward healer's list you never saw but can smell like stale cigar. You decide paper is just wood arguing with itself. Where's Stefan, you ask, because your body keeps a list separate from the city's. Charity ward, Mary says. She doesn't look at you when she says it, which is kinder. You run the walk because running turns dread into heat. The hospital smells of antiseptic and fear. The nurse with the square jaw intercepts you at the ward door, like a goalie who likes you but loves rules more. Not now, she says. Doctors with him. Tell him I brought stubborn, you say. She almost smiles. He needs it. We're giving him fever medicine and prayer. We have plenty of prayer. Any knives, you ask, the word tripping. Not yet, she says, and the yet is a shard you swallow. Feet are more complicated than people give them credit for. Everything ends up there. You leave before the ward swallows you. Outside, winter has decided to be honest today. Your breath feels like a visible thing. You want to break something and fix for others. So you go to the one place where you can always do at least one of those. The line, afternoon is quieter than yesterday, but not weak. Quieter like men and women who know they'll be back tomorrow and the day after and want to keep their voices. For that, a priest stands across the street pretending not to be with you. He is with you. A photographer pretends to be with nobody. He is with whoever wins. The Pinkertons pretend to be bored. They are wolves who learned to yawn to calm sheep. A carriage pulls up that doesn't belong to this block. Out steps a man with cheeks that never met winter. He has a lapel flower that looks freshly made. Mediation, he says to Harrison on the steps, and to the deputy, and to Mary, and to the heir. Let's be reasonable, he says, which is the kind of sentence people with cushions say when they want you to sit down. Reasonable, Mary repeats, ringing the word like a rag. 14 hours for children is reasonable. 12, the man says. We've all agreed we don't. Hire under 14 anyway. Your hiring clerks were absent. The days the 7-year-olds crawled under the looms. She says, pleasant. The man's smile grows a rind. He switches tactics, face turning, toward you like you're the knot he can untie. Son, he says, don't you want to go back to work? It's honorable, it builds America. And look, guards. On belts now. He gestures through the open door where a carpenter tightens a bolt that might save a scalp one day. You hear your father's voice, talking about the river. Everything moves. You hear Marie's voice talking about paper with teeth. You find your own. Guards are not a gift. You say they're late. Something in the man's eyes flinches. He was not ready for a sentence shaped like that from a body shaped like you. He recovers. Well, he says, then we agree. Tomorrow you come back inside. Tomorrow, the line says, and the word is a coat that fits 100 shoulders at once. Again, night has a smell when trouble is shopping. Coal, smoke, meat carts, cheap tobacco. Men who don't belong to your block lean wrong under your windows. You don't sleep. You sit with Ma by the lamplight that's turned low so the room doesn't look rich to the street. Papa pretends to close his eyes in a chair and fails. Marco's slate sleeps on the table, chalk dust like the dais ash, but gentler. 2 knocks, then silence, then 2 again, Pinkertons. Papa is at the door without sound. He cracks it. A man with a mustache that wants you to respect it stands like a question. Evening, he says cordially in the way the ocean says, come swim. Evening, Papa says, keeping his shoulder a door. Just checking on folks after the fire. The man lies cheerfully. Terrible business. And on this strike talk, dangerous to have children in the streets. Whole place could get. He searches for a word he can say out loud. Riled, and in factories. Ma asks from the shadow. Dangerous there, too. Safer now, he says brightly. We saw the new guards ourselves. Management is very conscientious. If we could just have a word with R. The woman who's been disturbing the peace, Mary, or the boy who runs messages for her. He smiles at you like he ordered that smile from a catalogue and it arrived on time. We're all women who disturb the peace here, Ma says. And our boys don't talk to men who can't say what they want. The mustache twitches. He adjusts his hat as if that adjusts reality. If you see her, he says, tell her the police would like a conversation. She can come down to the precinct or we can fetch her. We do recommend the former. We'll pass all messages with stamps, Papa says, and closes the door. Easy, not hard. Easy says you're not scared. It says you have a plan that includes neighbors and stairs and codes. You move without words. Lamps in windows 2 doors down. 3 knocks down the hall. A kid runs the back stairs like a rumor. You and Papa slip out the alley and across the yard that has seen every kind of deal. Up the next stairwell, 2 steps at a time. Mary's door opens before your knuckles land. She's dressed, shawl already pinned, like she expected this page of the book and underlined it. Time, she says. Time, you say back. The room is a tidy battlefield. The crate of handbills looks like a crate of potatoes now, covered in a towel. The little red flags the church ladies stitched hide in the bread bin under actual bread. The ledger of names your neighborhood's true gospel vanishes into the oven that hasn't worked since last summer but still tells the right story from the outside. Papers that don't matter are left in plain sight like bait window. Mary says to you and a boy from Hester Street you only know by ears. He's already unlatching. The fire escape is slick and cold and loud if you don't know its language. You do now. You go up instead of down roof to roof to roof. The city's upper story is a new country. Chimneys huff. Laundry lines crack with ice. Somewhere a cat owns an empire of tin. Below, boots. Above you. You move like a rumor the pink. Don't read. Across to the next building. Down that stair. Through the hallway with the rotten board you know how to step around. 2 knocks for Mrs. Goldstein, so she knows this is friend panic. She opens and takes Mary inside without asking. The way people water a neighbor's plant as if it were theirs. The lamp goes in the window. A light 2 streets over answers. A system, alive and running. Back in your hallway. The mustache and his catalogue smile knock at Mary's door that isn't Mary's anymore. A cop with a paper clears his throat. Warrant, he says like Latin absolves English. Inside, empty chairs host dust. The men look at furniture like it owes them. They leave, boots making a dumb music on the stairs. Down on the sidewalk, the ward healer in his neat hat tips it to the Pinkertons and checks a list in his pocket you want to set on fire with your stare. Breathe. Papa says softly in your ear you didn't hear coming. We don't burn paper. We outlive it. You go onto the roof one last time to watch the city's circulation. Lamps answering lamps. Doorways swallowing people and spitting out safety. This is what Mary meant. Same as fire. You keep us. The sky is cold and full of smoke that forgot its building. Over on Grand, a fiddle stumbles through the parting glass and finds its feet again when it's quiet. Quieter at least. You walk Mary back across roofs and downstairs, through hallways that greet her like a queen disguised as a cleaning lady. In Mrs. Goldstein's kitchen, she sits and drinks tea with 2 sugars like victory. They'll be back, she says, not romantic about it. They always come back when you wake people. She puts her cup down, so we will, too. On your way home, you detour the hospital because Stubborn needs a place to spend itself. The The square-jawed nurse meets you at the ward door and puts up a hand. Her face says trouble, her eyes say stay. Fever's down a hair, she whispers. If it keeps dropping by morning, we keep the foot. If it rises, we talk knives. She doesn't make you say the word. Pray messy, she adds. God listens better to the untidy. You stand in the hall and do what she said. You do not bother with pretty sentences. You offer the day exactly as it was: chalk and paper, belts and batons, soup and names, roofs and boots, man with a list, boy with a slate, Mary with her shawl like armor. You don't ask for a miracle in Latin. You ask for a degree or two of mercy, literally. The walk back is all edges softened by fatigue. Henry Street's windows glow like a ship at anchor. The mill breathes its bleak black. Your building squats, singed, stubborn. Inside, Ma has left the lamp low and the new blanket folded like a little roof on your bed. Marco snores like the beginning of a song. Anna's hair discovered a way to take up more space in sleep than awake. Papa sits at the table, rolling his wrapped wrist as if practicing for the next round. He looks at you in a way that makes you understand that some things don't go on. Paper, the weight of a hand on a boy's shoulder. The transfer of a courage you didn't know you took from him and he didn't know he gave. How was school? He asks, out of nowhere and exactly right. I wrote his name, you say, nodding toward Marco, the right one. Papa's mouth does that thing, the almost smile that lives where pride and worry overlap. Good, he says. Then, after a breath, tomorrow. Line in the morning, you say. Lessons with Marco after. Hospital at dusk. And whatever else knocks. Whatever else knocks, he repeats, as if saying it first makes it less heavy for you. You lie down. The mattress crackles like a fire that forgot to scorch. You put Marco's slate where your hand can find it in the dark. Outside, a patrol cart rolls, wheels talking to cobble. Someone coughs, the kind of cough the nurse would want to hear. Somewhere, a printing press chews and spits a story that might get your names wrong, but still scares a man in a neat hat. You close your eyes, and because you have earned the smallest luxury, you let your mind stage one good scene. Fever breaking like a bad habit, his foot cooling, the doctor saying, you can keep it, boy, with a voice that pretends not to be relieved. The picture holds. You make it your pillow. Night court morning is a bruise with a thin yellow edge. The city presses on it to see if it still hurts. It does. You wake to the taste of last night's smoke turned into morning's metal. Marco is already up, washing his face like he's erasing. A chalkboard. He shows you his slate your name again, this time clean and, then adds his own without looking at the letters. Anna sleeps in that way small kids do after danger, hard, like they bargained with the night, and one dot Papa flexes his wrapped wrist, testing the distance between used and broken. Shape up, he says. School, you say to Marco. Line, you tell yourself. Ma hands you a heel of bread and a kiss. You pretend not to notice because you are 12 and the street is listening. Outside, Orchard Street smells like onions, and ashes and a good intention boiled down to a stew. Men sweep their stoops like they can sweep away winter. The old woman Mary Rowe Pans, spine of the block, has turned her borrowed card table into a desk. On it, handbills, a tin of straight pins, a ledger that is not the city's but yours. Names, she says. What for? Witnesses. She says, paper likes a chorus. You print the names she calls out, and the ones you already know: Mrs. Goldstein, the Kowalski boys, the O'Briens, even the father when he's himself. You write slowly, like each letter might fall off the page if you hurry. Mary checks your work and nods once, a ceremony as official as any you've seen. On Henry Street, the settlement house. Smells like soap and hot water and plans. You drop Marco with the nurse teacher. He walks into the classroom like a boy coming home to a place he never knew he had. You stand in the doorway until the teacher tilts her head and you remember you. Have a life outside his letters. At the mill, the front door yawns. The new belt guards have grown overnight like mushrooms after rain. Carpenters bolt and polish. A mechanic same one from yesterday tests. A pedal that promises the machines could stop without 4 men and a crowbar. Progress has a sound. This one is a click that does not lie. Harrison stands with a city inspector and a man in a hat with a flower. The inspector carries the same clipboard. The flower carries the same smile. Compliance underway, Harrison says, and the inspector notes without blinking. The flower steps forward as if you asked him to. Neighbors, he begins, tasting. The word as if it were foreign. Let us commend the factory for its swift action. Mary coughs politely. We do not commend men for not killing children today, she says. We note it, of course. The flower says smoothly, and we note the hardship the stoppage has caused. So a compromise. Guards stay, quotas rise modestly, and children older than no children, says Mary. None. 14 is a law, not a suggestion. The deputy shifts his baton from one hand to the other, like a bored man trying not to be. The Pinkertons watch the crowd the way cats watch dishes. You feel the line's breath bunch, then smooth. This is a long game, and the old woman is playing chess while the flower fiddles with checkers. Afternoon, the flower says, we'll reconvene with a mediator appointed by the city. Bring him to the night court, someone says. From behind you, laughter ripples. The kind that understands jokes and knives share a drawer. You walk toward the hospital with the loaf you didn't eat. Because carrying bread to sick friends is a thing that makes you feel like a person in a city. That keeps trying to make you a moving part. The square-jawed nurse meets you at the ward door and gives you a look like you're a question she plans to answer honestly. Fever, you ask. Down, she says, letting the word be a chair you can sit on for a minute. If it stays down, the foot stays. If not, we bargain with knives. Bargain, you ask, hating the word in that sentence. Sometimes the body is a stubborn landlord, she says. We negotiate. You see Stefan asleep, his face grey as dishwater, his foot wrapped in more cloth than you own. You think about all the ways people are wrapped, in blankets with edges, in bandages, in law, in lists. You want to unwrap everything and see what's left. Marie is propped up 2 beds over, hair braided like victory, mouth set like the city. Taught it. You look like you lost a fight with a coal bin, she says. I won, you say. She lifts an eyebrow. You hold up the bread. Then maybe consider losing more often, she says, and tears into it with a laugh that doesn't pull. Any stitches? You tell her about the guards, the inspector, the flower with his smile, the promise of a mediator. She snorts. Men who love the word moderate always stand in a warm place, she says. Keep your coat. You leave because you promised the teacher you'd be back by noon with Marco, and because there's a line to hold, and because the day is made of errands that add up to stubborn dot at Henry Street. Marco has written 5 words in 2 languages and drawn a ship that looks like a horse with a sail. The teacher shows you a stack of papers, lessons, schedules. A notice about an evening class for adults on civics. A word you say out loud twice to hear what it sounds like in your mouth. Bring your father, she says. He can't vote. You say, not yet, she says. Men learn before papers catch up. You walk him home with his slate like a trophy. He tells you everything at once, the way kids do when they finally discover the inside of their own head. You pretend to be annoyed. You are not. The afternoon. Picket hums like a hive that has learned to buzz at a pitch that confuses bears. The deputy counts your shoulders as if he gets paid by the dozen. The Pinkertons write in notebooks that might be blank but still feel like nets. The flower returns with another man, a lawyer with tired eyes, who says words like injunction and disturbing the peace as if peace were a chair you bumped into. Mary listens with her head tilted like she's trying to hear a lie's heartbeat. We stand on the sidewalk, she says. We sing, we carry bread, we tell the truth. If that disturbs your peace, perhaps your peace is easily upset. The deputy does the thing with his baton again, a bored man threatening furniture. The lawyer unfolds a paper like a priest opening. A book. If you fail to disperse, the court will consider. His voice trails off because he sees the children in the line. He is not a monster. He's a man who forgot children existed until they showed up with their small, hard mouths. You don't disperse, you sing. Not a union song, those haven't made it to your block yet. A hymn someone's grandmother brought over the water, a lullaby turned shyly into a march. It fits your throats. It surprises the deputy. It makes the Pinkertons blink. The lawyer folds his paper and leaves to find a different way to lose. Dusk gets dressed fast in January. 1 minute the street is grey. The next it is a room somebody forgot to light. That's when the wagon comes. Not the fire wagon. The other kind. Police. A bailiff you've seen at the courthouse sits beside the driver like a man on the way to by nails. They come for Mary because of course they do. Disturbing the peace, the bailiff says, offering his paper like a bouquet of weeds. Our peace is fine, Mary says. Yours seems nervous. Night court, he says. You can tell the judge. She turns to you without turning her back to them. Tell Henry Street, she says. Tell the priest. Tell the reporter with the hat that isn't warm enough. She leans close. Use the back stair at the tombs. The bail clerk has a soft heart and a hard ledger. You nod and she nods. And that's a vow more formal than anything men with gowns and gavels will do tonight. You run through alleys the city doesn't advertise, under windows that leak supper and fights, into the settlement house where the nurse doesn't ask questions. She throws on a coat, Emma. She calls to a woman in spectacles with a mouth that looks like it can turn a paragraph into a knife. Mary's pinched. The woman Mema picks up, a satchel that could be a doctor's or a lawyer's or a magician's. Which judge? She asks. Tombs, you say, because you've heard men say it at the dock and in the line and with their eyes. Emma doesn't flinch. She writes a note on a card and hands it to you. Give this to the clerk, she says. He thinks my penmanship is a miracle. A priest is already outside. Collar up, conscience out. The reporter with the hat that isn't warm enough appears like he's been here waiting for this page of the day. The four of you, boy, nurse, lawyer, priest move like a sentence that knows where its period goes. Night court smells like paper and the sadness of men who forgot supper. A line of defendants carries the day's harvest, drunks, pickpockets. A woman who broke a window because she wanted to be inside just once. The judge's hair is the color of chimney ash. His eyes are the color of winter. He has a pile of papers and a patience he sharpens on people. Mary stands straight in front of him, shawl-like armor. Disturbing the peace, the bailiff recites. What kind of peace was it? The judge asks wearily, pen already poised. The kind that lets children work 14 hours and calls it patriotism, Mary says. The judge looks up, truly. People don't usually hand him sentences like that. Counsel, he asks the bailiff, who glances at the city's lawyer, who glances at his flower, who is not here. Sensibly. Emma steps in like a dancer. Your Honor, my client is the backbone of her block. She organizes food, blankets, lessons, and restraint. She disturbed nothing but complacency. She submit to conditions the court finds reasonable. Stay off the mill's doorstep after sundown. Keep the picket moving, no more than 2 lanterns at a time. 2 lanterns. The judge asks, as if curious despite himself. So the fire wardens sleep. Emma says without smiling. The judge looks at Mary. He looks at you, because you error right. Bend her shoulder like a comma, where you belong. He looks at the priest, who does not try to look holy. He looks at the nurse, who looks like a person who knows how to treat a burn and a bailiff. He sighs an old sigh. $50, he says, or personal regret. If a respectable person vouches, Reverend, I vouch, the priest says. So do I, Emma says, because she knows the game and enjoys winning. Conditions as proposed. The judge adds, because he is a man who enjoys pretending he invented. Good ideas, he just heard. And Ms. Marianne, Your Honor, no calls to riot. Mary tilts her head. Your Honor, I don't know how to call a riot, she says dryly. We only know how to call neighbors. A smile escapes the judge and slams into his hand like a bird into a window. He hits the gavel. Next, he says, but he looks at you as if to say, don't make me regret remembering I have a human face. Outside, the night is colder than money. Mary breathes deep like a woman who won a very small war. The reporter scribbles. The priest claps you on the shoulder like he baptizes, with mittens. Emma hands you a paper. For your landlord, she says. It says the fire department found his stairs an insult. Tenement House Act may not be law yet, but fear is. He'll feel it in his pocket. Paper with teeth, you say paper. With elbows, she counters. Teeth bite, and then you're done. Elbows keep making space. You walk Mary home by the route made of roofs and back stairs. Because men with moustaches are still out shopping for trouble, and you won't sell. Lamps blink in windows, code that means safe now. Mrs. Goldstein opens her door before Mary knocks. Tea appears. Bread appears. So does a jar with pennies, nickels, a button, a nail, to marbles, a corkscrew. This is bail money, neighborhood style. You want to laugh and cry, and instead you count, because counting feels like being useful. Tomorrow, Mary says when the tea is gone and the neighborhood's heart has slowed. We show the flower man how a compromise works. We compromise on nothing that makes children smaller. Tomorrow, you echo, because the word has become more than a promise. It's the hinge your life turns on. You step into the hallway, and the building's breath fogs in the stairwell light. Papa is waiting on the landing, like the city sent him to meet you. He holds out a hand without asking about the night court, because he knows the answer from your face, Stefan. He asks, down a degree, you say. Maybe keeps the foot. Good, he says softly, like he's not sure who needs to hear it more, you or him. You both listen to the stair creak as the priest goes down, to the murmur of Mrs. Lullaby in the kitchen, to the way a neighborhood resets its spine after a shove dot in your room. Ma has left the lamp low and the blanket folded over like a smile. Marco is asleep with chalk dust on his cheek, as if his dreams had to erase something hard. Anna has arranged your boot as if it were a doll she forgave. You touch the slate on the table. Your name there looks like a small door that opens whichever way you push. Papa sits. He rubs his wrist. The boss posted a list, he says without drama. Men who shouted on the picket. Says those men will find work elsewhere. Elsewhere means nowhere. Blacklist, you say. The word fits in your mouth like a stone. He nods, then shrugs the shrug of men who cannot change the river's width tonight. We'll be early to the uplit. The day see our faces before the list does. He looks at you, and you. Morning line, you say. Take Marco to lessons. Tombs again if they decide peace is fragile. Hospital at dusk. Settlement. In the evening, civics. You try the word again. It still tastes like a tool. He smiles with the corners of his eyes. Busy boy, he says. Busy city, you say back. You lie down. The mattress crackles. The ceiling remembers your eyes. Somewhere, a ship horn calls out on the river, long and low, like a man texting in 1900. I am here. The mill's whistle sleeps still there, still ugly. A habit the city is unlearning one day at a time. You close your eyes and build a scene on purpose, because the day owes you one. Stefan's fever breaking like a board under a good foot, Marie. Walking out of the ward with a tongue sharper than any blade. The judge reading the paper tomorrow and pretending he invented decency. The inspector coming back with a measuring stick and a frown that buys you a guard on a bad corner. Marco writing his whole name without looking at the letters. Anna laughing at a joke she will explain 3 times because she wants you to laugh right. Outside, a patrol cart rattles. Inside, your breath evens. Tomorrow is already pawing at the door. You sleep holding the neighborhood in your hands, the way you held the bread at the hospital, like it's warm and fragile and worth carrying the long way home. The mediator dawn doesn't arrive so much as admit it has to. The sky goes from coal to dirty linen. The city yawns, checks its pockets, finds them empty, and starts anyway. Shape up, Papa says, testing his bandaged wrist like a hinge. School, you tell Marco. Line, you tell yourself. Ma presses a heel of bread into your hand like a vote of confidence. Bring your brother back with his head full, she says. You kiss her cheek on the way out and pretend you didn't because you are 12 and Orchard Street has ears. At the dock. The crowd is a rough circle, pretending to be a line. The hiring boss chews his matchstick like it's a man's patience. The clipboard man reads names, and also the spaces between them. Enzo. He says, eyes already sliding to the next favor. Papa steps forward. Then the foreman with the clean hat leans and whispers. The clipboard man's mouth does a small thing. The kind of twitch made by lists you don't get to see. Not today, he says, casual as weather, short crew, blacklist. The word doesn't get said. It sits in the cold between you, heavy. As Iron Papa nods, like he was agreeing with a clock. Pier 19, he says quietly, already turning. You follow. The river gives you choices the way a gambler does. Pier 19. Takes him by noon for half a day, and no promise of tomorrow. We'll eat on that, he says, the way men say we when they mean I won't. He sends you back up into the streets that make you feel smaller and bigger at the same time. Henry, street glows, like a sensible thought. Marco goes in, with his slate raised like a banner. He comes out later, with chalk on his knuckles, and a grin the city didn't teach him. What did you learn? Everything, he says, which is not wrong when you've been starving for letters. Good, you say, tomorrow again. Today, still, he counters. And you love him exactly for that. You deliver him to Ma, and run your errands into a shape, handbills from Mary's card table, English on one side, Yiddish and Italian on the other. 2 lamps in windows to tell neighbors which stair to avoid. Names in a ledger that is yours, not theirs. By the time you reach Anderson, the building looks like it got religion overnight. Belt guards shine like newly brushed teeth. A mechanic stomps, a foot pedal, and a line of looms cough and stop. You can hear the gasp from the line even over the traffic paper turned into metal. The inspector with the clipboard walks through, with a frown that buys you a little more safety each time he writes. Harrison stands at the door with his jaw arranged to look civic. Beside him is the flower from yesterday, lapel bright. Smile, bright around. A third man in a dark coat, carrying a leather portfolio, and a fatigue that comes from reading human weather too long. Mediator, somebody whispers, a word people use when they want you to sit down. Mary steps forward, shawl pinned like armor, eyes that do not blink for theater. The deputy leans his baton from one hand to the other, as if making sure each palm gets a turn. The Pinkertons yawn carefully. Neighbors. The flower begins, as if the word fits him. We all want the same thing: order, prosperity, dignity, bread, someone calls, and less of our blood in your cloth. The mediator raises a hand without pomp, and the noise takes one step back. Here is the proposal, he says. Voice dry as legal paper. Immediate installation of guards and emergency stops in all rooms. He nods toward the inspector, who nods back. Company recognizes the 14-year law and will not hire under it, effective at once. A murmur, like a warm wind, moves the line. In return, a temporary productivity increase of 5% to offset downtime. Fines for lateness and privy breaks suspended. An accident relief fund modest administered by the church and Henry Street with contributions from company. And private citizens. He glances at the priest and at Mary, who both withhold their nods like coin and hours. Mary asks, as if ordering from a menu she knows by heart. 14 was yesterday, 12 today, 10 tomorrow, 8 someday. Where do we stop? 10, the mediator says. He says it like he knows the word is bigger than his portfolio. Phased in over 60 days. Harrison's jaw tightens. The flower's smile cracks. The Pinkertons actually stop writing. 60 days, Mary repeats, rolling the number around her mouth like a nail. And no child labor now. Now, the mediator says, checking the inspector's face for confirmation and finding enough, and quotas. Mary asks, 5% for 5 days, and then down. Or you make us pay forever for not wanting. To be eaten, temporary, the mediator says, turning the word into a line item. Review in a fortnight with representatives from the block and the mill. He nods at the priest, who nods at the old woman, who nods as if an idea just obeyed her. Harrison starts to say something about business and burdens. Mary lifts a hand like the judge at night court. You billed us for your missing guards for 10 years, she says. We won't pay your arrears. The mediator could smile. He doesn't. Then we have a shape, he says. Guards, stops. 14 enforced. Fines gone. Accident fund. 10 hours in 60 days. Temporary quotas reviewed in 2 weeks in public. He looks at Harrison until Harrison says something that sounds like yes in a language of teeth and blacklists. You hear yourself say, voice cracking on the stone in it. The mediator looks directly at you. Perhaps because you asked in a boy's mouth what men whisper round ledgers. No list kept or shared punishing lawful assembly, he says, and the inspector clears his throat as if he heard a tricky promise turn into ink. Harrison's eyes do math. The flower looks like someone stole his ribbon. Mary doesn't cheer. She nods once. We'll hold you to paper, she says. And if paper melts, we hold you to the street. The line doesn't erupt, it breathes. You feel your ribs make room for a different kind of day. Inside, carpenter's hammer. Outside, you start building your own day. First stop, the charity ward. The square-jawed nurse meets you with the look you prayed for and didn't dare paint in your head. Fever down and holding, she says. Foot stays. She lets the sentence be a chair you sit in with your whole body. Weeks in bed, then months of being angry at stairs. She adds, bring him books that don't lie. I'll bring him letters, you say. Thinking of Marco's slate and the way he wrote your real name like a dare. Stefan sees you and tries to sit up like pride is a muscle. You push him back with a hand that shakes and you pretend it's not. You keep your foot, you say, and he covers his eyes with one arm like he's embarrassed to be grateful in public. Tell the mill, I'll be late, he croaks. It's a bad joke and the best one you've heard. Marie is already sitting up, hair braided like she plans to use it as a weapon if needed. They say I can sit on the stoop by Thursday, she announces. If the inspector wants to count that as compliance, I'll let him. You tell her the shape of the day guards stops, the 14s, the 10s. She listens like a foreman you would actually work for. Paper with elbows, she says. Keep jabbing. You leave a heel of bread and a piece of contraband sugar. From your coat cuff, and the look she gives you makes you feel like a king with pockets. Back on Orchard. The landlord's man is at it again, hat in hand the way a cat carries a mouse. He starts to say, assess, and Ma hands him a letterman's letter. The one that mentions stairs called an insult and a board with legal memory. The man reads like a drowning person spotting shore. We can extend a week. He says, well, estimate, and fix the stair, Ma says, not a request. And the window, you add, because courage runs downhill. He nods, twice, like a man discovering his neck has hinges. Will, comply, he says, and you try not to enjoy how that word tastes in his mouth. In the afternoon, the flower returns with a photographer and tries to own the compromise with his lapel. The line doesn't give him that. Mothers with children stand at the door with the inspector and count belt guards themselves. A piece of chalk appears from nowhere, and kids make big white 14s on the sidewalk like blessings. Mary watches and doesn't stop them. The deputy watches and doesn't know what to arrest. At 4, you walk Marco to Henry Street for evening lessons. Emma is at the front with a stack of papers and a mouth that can turn law into sentences a block can use. The class smells like wool and coffee and a new kind of listening. What's an injunction? She asks. A man with dock hands says, paper. That tells you to stop being a problem. Emma smiles. Close. Paper that tries to move your feet. You answer by knowing where the sidewalk ends and the street begins, by keeping the picket moving, by writing down who touches you and when, by reminding the court you disturbed nothing but complacency. She teaches you how to keep a notebook. She teaches Papa how to sign his name so it can't be erased. He writes Enzo, slow, careful, then faster, then again. Then he stares at it like it's a photograph of himself he didn't know existed. What's blacklisting? Emma asks. Illegal lists shared among bosses. She nods. Hard to prove. But when a man tells you not today, and it is always today, start counting. Names, dates, words. She hands out tiny notebooks and pencils that look like stubs and feel like knives. What's civics? A woman asks from the back. Learning how to be a problem correctly, Emma says, and even the priest laughs. You go home with a notebook in your pocket and the shape of a sentence in your mouth. We don't pay for not being mangled. You plan to write it on a handbill when nobody's looking. Evening finds you at the mill again, not to work, to witness. The mediators promise lives on wood now. Guards shine under gaslight. A sheet of paper is posted in the foyer rules. Ages, hours coming like a tide table. Mary demands a copy and gets one because the inspector is still within glowering distance. The deputy counts the lanterns. 1, 2. The line keeps moving. Everyone knows the night court listened last night. Nobody wants to find out if it listened only once. The ward healer in his neat hat tries again with his sack of coffee and his list in his pocket. From Mr. Murphy, he smiles. Remember us come spring. Ma takes the coffee like a woman who knows the price of warmth. We remember everything, she says. The healer taps his list. You tap your notebook. He sees you do it and touches his hat like the beginning of a truce. Neither of you will keep. You bring the inspector's posted paper to the hospital like flowers. Marie pretends to be bored and reads every line twice. 10 hours, she says. 2 months. I can do 2 months. She flicks a glance at Stefan. He can't, she adds softly. So we fight like he's still on the floor with us. Tomorrow we're bringing chalk. You tell her. Kids hour. Big 14s. Maybe an 8 for the future. She grins, without a stitch moving. Bring a 0 for the fines we don't pay anymore. On the walk back, snow starts the way it always does in this city, one flake that looks like a lie. Then another, and then the air decides it is winter again. Orchard Street glows in the gaslight, all edges softened. The building's hurt places hide a little under white. Mrs. Goldstein's window is a square of honey. The O'Brien's door pushes out a lullaby that is really a truce with a bottle. The Kowalski boys drag a crate up. The stairs that will be a table for 1 week and a sled for 1 hour. Papa meets you at the corner. Half day, he says. Half pay, tomorrow earlier. He shows you his name in his new notebook, and your chest does the grow hurt thing again. You show him yours. He nods like a man who has seen a bridge appear where there wasn't one dot at home. Ma has cabbage, making the whole room smell like stubborn. Marco writes ABC like he's mapping streets he plans to conquer. Anna draws a guard over a belt with 7 lines because 1 line didn't feel like enough protection. Civics, Papa asks. It's how to be a problem correctly. You say, and he laughs, the surprise laugh you love. Then he sobers. Night court again. Maybe not tonight, you say. But keep your shoes near the door. You lie down. The new blanket with edges finds your chin. The cornhusk mattress crackles like a fire that learned its lesson. You put the tiny notebook on the crate next to Marco's slate. Paper with elbows. Outside, a ship horn sounds on the river. Long and low, the city's way of saying, I am still here. The mill's whistle is quiet for once in your head. You let yourself build one small scene as a pillow. Stefan sleeping without fever. Marie on a stoop, the mediator reading a report that makes Harrison mad and you safe, Emma counting lanterns. And finding two, the inspector returning without boredom, the flower buying a warmer hat, the ward healer misplacing his list, Popper's name on a payroll ledger that has no shadow, Marco writing Yeppe without checking his hand, Anna drawing. 8 big hours like a sun. Chalk weather. The snow tries to make everything quiet. The city refuses. It fell in the night clean, generous, pretending to forgive. In the morning it shows you what it covered. Boot tracks, ash, a broken slat. A place on the stoop where somebody sat and thought too hard. You scrape frost off the inside of the window with your fingernail, and the sound makes your teeth ache in sympathy. Eat, Ma says, because snow or no snow, the day still wants tolls paid. She splits a heel of bread 4 ways, with a skill that would impress a surgeon. Papa ties his scarf with his one good hand, rolling the bandage on the other like it's a coin he's not sure he earned. Shape up, he says. School, you tell Marco, who is already wiping his slate with the corner of his sleeve like he can polish letters brighter, line. You tell yourself, and the word sticks to your ribs in a way you've come to like. On Orchard, the world is edges in chalk, stoops, push carts wearing white hats, clotheslines, a geometry lesson. The 14 the kids drew yesterday on the mill sidewalk has gone pale under the snow, like a promise someone whispered and the night tried to smother. You stomp a path to it, kneel, and redraw the 4 and the 1 with your heel, big as a door. A little girl from Hester Street watches, then takes your chalk nub and adds an 8 near it, shy and enormous. Somebody laughs. Mary doesn't. She nods once, which in this neighborhood is applause. Down at the river, the shape-up looks like a prayer circle that's tired of praying. The hiring boss chews his matchstick. The foreman with the clean hat pretends not to know which names are written on a list he can feel in his pocket. Enzo, he says, and for a second your father's shoulders ease as if the day might be polite. Then the whisper, the twitch, the shrug. Short crew, the boss adds, as if the river set the number. Pier 19, Papa says, already turning his collar. To the wind. Half days, still a day. You nod and watch him go, small against all that water and iron. A man the river hasn't decided to keep yet. Henry Street smells like heat invented by people who believe in it long enough that it appears. Marco hands his slate to the nurse teacher, like he's giving up a shield to pick up a sword. Today we do numbers, she says, and his eyes widen with the kind of fear that tastes like sugar. You stand in the doorway until she gives you that head tilt and you remember you promised to be useful elsewhere. Useful looks like paper in Mary's hands. The card table that used to be a door is a desk again. On it, handbills in English, Yiddish, Italian, a tin for straight pins. A ledger of names, thickening like stew. Age papers this afternoon, she says, without looking up. Emma roped a clerk and a stamp. Age papers. You ask, proof the law can see a child, she says. Else the bosses pretend their eyes are bad. At the mill, the new. Belt guards shine even under winter light. Inside, carpenters curse softly at bolts that don't acknowledge gloves. A mechanic stomps the emergency pedal click. Stop panned for a breath, the floor holds still like a muscle learning a new trick. The inspector with the clipboard appears like a man who promised to haunt a place until it behaved. He doesn't smile. You wouldn't trust him if he did. Harrison stands at the threshold with a jaw that makes you want to hand him a softer one. Beside him, the lapel flower from yesterday is still foolishly alive in this weather. Compliance continues. Harrison says to the reporter who came despite the snow and to the sky. Review in 2 weeks is today, Mary reminds him, voice like a plumb line. We'll have our meeting at 4 in the church hall, not in your office. Air's cleaner. The deputy shifts his baton from hand to hand, redistributing boredom. The Pinkertons yawn like cats that studied manners. The line holds, humming a low note that fits January. Noon is a bowl of steam in the settlement kitchen. Ma sends you with a loaf crust, and you stretch it by thinking kind thoughts at it. The nurse with the square jaw puts another ladle in your bowl unasked, which is a kind thought made hot. Marco bursts out of the classroom with chalk on his cuffs and a grin he tries to wipe off because Orchard Street is watching. Fractions, he says, like he climbed a wall. They make sense if you squint. Don't squint. The teacher calls, because she overhears everything worth saving. Make the page come closer. You swing by the charity ward with contraband. Sugar stuck under your fingernail and a book the settlement librarian pressed into your hand with a look of conspiracy. Stefan's fever is down another ½ degree and he lets you read 2 pages before smirking at the way you stumble over a long word on purpose to make him feel better. Tell Harrison, he rasps. If he wants quotas, I'm ahead on healing. Marie sits propped like a general on leave. They say I can be on the stoop by Thursday, she declares. I plan to hold court, bring tributes, she flicks. At the book in your hand, that'll do. On your way back, a boy no taller than your chest is standing by the mill door, hat in hand, coat 3 seasons past done. You recognize him through the Leia Stanisław, the Polish kid who fainted his first day. He's got his mother's hand in a death grip. Harrison's clerk is explaining the law as if it were his idea. 14, he says. 14. And papers. Papers, the mother repeats. Like the word is a coin someone won't take. Henry Street, at 2. You tell her, quick, before her hope freezes. They'll stamp his age, honest. Later school, not this. You point at the door as if it's a mouth with teeth. She looks like a person offered a rope and a lock at the same time. 2, she says, and you say it again with your whole face. By afternoon, the church hall is a city with better manners. The mediator arrives in a dark coat that looks like it has opinions. The inspector with his clipboard like a man who believes. In rulers, the priest, coat collar up, conscience awake. Emma, spectacles like blades. Harrison, jaw prepared to grind. The flower, still blooming like a fool. The Pinkertons' coats, expensive and eyes on discount. The pews hold neighbors steaming from the cold. And a row of kids with chalk on their fingers like a uniform. Order. The priest says, though his voice makes it clear he expects none. The mediator lays it out. Guards installed on the spinning. Floors, emergency stops tested. Fines suspended as posted. Accident fund seeded with money from the company, the church, the settlement. And this makes you sit up to envelopes slid under the sacristy door with no names and the thick feel of nearby guilt. We have already paid out to Brennan's family and to the girl from the 3rd floor. The priest adds, the word paid, tasting like justice for once. Ours, Mary says, and the whole hall leans. 10. The mediator answers, phased in. Loom maintenance Saturdays, so the week keeps its shape. Quotas, Harrison interjects. Too fast. We've lost time installing guards. Inefficiencies, Emma stands the way a knife stands up in a block. Temporary 5%, she recites. You said it in front of God and the inspector. 2 weeks are up. Show cause or stand down. Harrison produces a paper that smells like math doing bad things. Output lags 8%, he says. We have to. Your belts were off for 3 days, Mary says, tapping the paper with a finger that would walk into a fire if it wanted to. Our kids tracked. We have census. She waves, and 3 small hands shoot up with notebooks. The 7 a.m. stop that lasted 23 minutes. The midday jam on Tuesday, the afternoon when the carpenter broke a bolt and had to fetch another. Emma takes the kids' notes like a banker taking deposits and stacks them next to Harrison's fancy column of lies. The inspector clears his throat. My figures show guard installation took 22 man-hours per aisle, and that the stoppages you attribute to inefficiency are, in fact, your own crews fitting the devices. He looks at Harrison as if he enjoys being bored by men who lie. I recommend the temporary quota be retired now. Mary doesn't smile. We accept your recommendation, she says, and the hall breathes out in a way you feel in your wrists and blacklists. You hear yourself say, because somebody needs to say the word in a room that prefers euphemism. The mediator looks at you like he forgot the city makes boys like you. The priest speaks first. Lists that bar men from work for standing outside their own factory are not legal. We will collect affidavits. We will carry them to the judge who remembered he had a face last night. We will not let paper make ghosts out of the living. Harrison's mouth does a bitter thing. The flower adjusts his lapel like adjusting reality. The Pinkertons make a note that might just say, "Boy, age papers," Emma says, rolling her satchel up to the table. Any child under 14, step forward with your mother or father or neighbor who remembers how many winters you've lived. We sign, we stamp. The settlement will keep a copy. The church will keep a copy. You will hold the third like a shield. The clerk she robed appears with a stamp and the weight of City Hall on a string. They come, Stanislas, with a cap he won't take off, a Jewish girl with braids that refuse to be scared, a pair of brothers from Baxter who share a calendar and a coat. Mary asks them questions that sound like kindness and sound like law. What month did the big snow cave the roof on Hester? Before or after you were born? How old was your sister when the cholera cart came? The parents answer out loud. The neighborhood answers under its breath. Stamp, stamp, stamp. The sound is a heartbeat that learned new work in the corner. The accident fund opens for business with more dignity than you expected from money. A widow with a face like a shut. Door takes an envelope and says thank you like she's apologizing to someone not in the room. The Brennan boy's father signs for coal with hands as big as a pair of regrets. The mother of the girl from the 3rd floor cries into a handkerchief somebody embroidered long ago for a day that didn't happen. By the time the church bell insists on 5 o'clock, the hall smells like wool and ink and soup someone promised would be hot in 20 minutes. The mediator recites what is now true. Guards on belts, stops in reach, fines gone. Accident fund open and public. Child labor banned in practice, not just in print. 10-hour day walking to ward. Use 60 days measured in chalkhand, the temporary. Quota buried under the inspector's frown. Review in another fortnight, he adds. Because paper likes recurring appointments with conscience. Harrison tries a last-minute piece of theater. We'll need apprentices, boys to carry. Bobbins, fetch tools. Non-machine work. He says it like sugar. Mary doesn't blink. Half day at Henry Street, if they intend to be men in this city, she says. Paper from the teacher. Else your apprentices are just children with new hats. The mediator nods. surprised to find himself agreeing with someone without a portfolio. Half-day schooling for any minors in any capacity, he says. Enforced by loss of license. The inspector writes it. The flower wilts a little in the heat of a compromise that didn't ask his permission. Outside, it is snowing again, finer now, the kind that makes your eyelashes count themselves. The line doesn't go home. It walks the block, not a march, exactly more like a proof. Mothers with age papers in their pockets. Kids with chalk on their fingers. Men with notebooks that are beginning to look like weapons. The deputy counts lanterns. 1, 2, the Pinkertons smoke. They're polite cigarettes and look bored in the way wolves look bored at sheep that learn to whistle. You walk with Marco and the little girl from Hester who drew the 8 and Stashek, who keeps touching the stamp in his pocket like it's a warm stone. He grins at you and you grin back, and for a second the city feels like someone you might forgive. At Orchard, the landlord's man appears with a carpenter who has shoulders like apology. Stare, he says, not meeting Ma's eyes. Window. They replace the broken riser and the sash that bit your fingers for 2 winters. He leaves a paper that says inspection in letters that look like teeth. Ma folds it into the bread tin like a blessed card. Papa comes home with a half-day's pay, and an orange he insists was bruised beyond sale and therefore free. Anna doesn't care about lies that taste like sunshine. She peels it with the concentration of a scientist and eats it in wedges so slow the universe shifts its schedule to keep up. For a minute the room smells like somewhere else. Civics, Papa asks later, rolling his wrist like a man trying to convince his body to be reasonable. Tonight, you say. Emma's teaching injunction again, in case the flower gets tired of being told no. Marco practices numbers on his slate until his tongue sticks out of his mouth from the strain. He writes 10 like a promise, 14 like a door, 8 like a sun. He writes your name again, the right one, and doesn't check the letters this time. He writes Papa's too, and Papa pretends not to care, and then writes his own again in his notebook. A little bolder, a little faster. You slip out to the hospital with a page you copied from the book, because Stefan likes the way you mispronounce things, and because Marie will mock you and then ask you to read it again. The square-jawed nurse lets you stay 5 minutes past the rule, and you use all of them like they were loaned by a kind banker on your way back. The ward healer with the neat hat steps out of a doorway like a punctuation mark. Heard about your meeting, he says. Productive. Mr. Murphy supports the working family. Mr. Murphy supports the part of the working family that remembers him in April. You say, because Emma taught you how to be a problem correctly. And it turns out you enjoy your homework. He tips his hat, unbothered. Take the coffee, he says, and you do, because every piece of this city costs something and you're learning when to pay and when to invoice. You climb the new stair with a satisfaction you try not to show, because it tastes like pride and you don't want to waste any. In the room, the new window opens without prayer and closes without swearing. The blanket with edges has learned your names. The lamp burns steady as a heartbeat. Marco is asleep with chalk dust on his knuckles, like he fought letters and won. Anna snores like a mouse with big ideas. Papa sits at the table, turning his stub of a pencil between forefinger and thumb. 2 weeks, he says. Another review then. 2 weeks, you say. Chalk weather. He looks at you the way men look at boys when they realize the city puts something inside them they can't take out and wouldn't if they could, tomorrow. Line in the morning, you say. Half-day school for apprentices if Harrison tries anything cute. Age papers for the kids on Monroe. Settlement at dusk for civics. Hospital if they'll let me sit. Dock at dawn the day after if Pier 19 keeps its word. He nods. Busy boy, busy city, you say back. You lie down, the corn husks crackle, but softer now. Like the mattress, learn to whisper. The snow outside pins the street down without, smothering it. Somewhere, a ship horn blows long and low. A sound you are now convinced is the river telling you it believes you might work out your arrangements. The mill doesn't whistle in your head tonight. The church bell from the hall is louder, counting off the hour like a judge who discovered he likes people. You let yourself build one scene to sleep on. The review 2 weeks from now. Another chalk, 14. Another inspector frown. Harrison arriving. With a jaw he can't unclench, and leaving with paper he can't burn. Emma teaching you the word precedent, and making you use it correctly. Mary tapping a table with a finger that sets clocks. Stefan stepping on a stair he doesn't hate. Marie on the stoop like royalty. Papa's name in ink with a ledger. Can't pretend it never saw it. Marco writing tomorrow without asking how to spell it. Anna laughing at snow because it dared her and she dared back. Ink on snow morning sneaks in wearing yesterday's coat. The window has a lace of frost. That looks like somebody practiced their letters on the glass and forgot to stop. You wake to the paperboy's voice climbing the stairs like a sparrow that learned to shout. Child labor halted at City Mill. 10 hours coming. He crows, the headline bigger than his lungs. He can't quite read the words he's selling. Not yet. He will. You'll make sure Ma has a heel of bread, with the precision of someone who has been told more than once that there isn't enough and refused to agree. Papa works his bandage, testing the hinge. Marco is already scratching numbers on his slate, tongue out in concentration, trying to make 1/2 and 1/4 behave like neighbors instead of enemies. Anna is drawing 8s again, each one like a little snowman lying down to nap. You buy a paper because sometimes you have to see your life explained to strangers to believe it happened. The newsprint comes off on your fingers, a grey kiss that feels like being noticed and being dirty at once. The story has a picture blurred, all elbows and hats. A belt guard, shining like a polished tooth. The reporter calls it a compromise brokered by the city. He doesn't mention Mary's finger, tapping the table like a metronome that kept everybody honest. He doesn't mention Emma's sharpened spectacles. He certainly doesn't mention the chalk numbers under your boots. The line outside Anderson is smaller today and somehow taller. Snow packs itself into the cracks and the cobbles as if the street were a dentist. The 14 you stomped back into the sidewalk is crisp again, the edges walled by white. Kids add new marks without waiting for permission. 3 10s. A 0 with teeth drawn inside it, and one ambitious 8 that looks like somebody drew a future and forgot to humble it. Harrison is at the entrance, not because he wants to be, but because the inspector's shadow is longer than his doorway. He has a new sign. Fines suspended by order until further review. He tacks it up hard enough to drive the nail through the wood and the wall and the past if he could. The inspector watches, pen ready, the way a cat watches a door. The flower is here, too, still blooming, still wrong in whether that eats color. Compliance continues. Harrison tells the reporter who wore a warmer hat today, "We are patriots of progress." Mary coughs into her shawl. "You are patriots of not being sued," she says pleasantly. "We accept it. You don't go inside. That's not your job right now. Your job is to watch and count and carry paper, with elbows, to make sure the rules written on the foyer wall live on floors that chew fingers. To look at the faces of the kids who still show up and ask, half day at school after, with your eyebrows until they answer yes, even if their mouth meant no. Two boys in caps, too big for their heads, slip past, carrying a crate of empty bobbins like a shared secret. Apprentices, Harrison calls them. Students, Emma will call them later. You catch one by the sleeve. Henry Street, afternoon, you say. Paper for your pocket. He nods, the way kids nod when they don't plan to agree, but want to. Avoid lightning. You let him go anyway. You know where his mother lives. You know which stair creaks in her building. You know all the ways a city makes promises without writing any down. At the docks, the shape-up is moodier than the river. The hiring boss calls names like he's reading a rosary of sins. The clean-hat foreman pretends his pockets don't carry stones. Enzo, the boss says, as if the day were feeling generous. Then the whisper. Then the little shrug that means. The list in his pocket is hungry and you are lunch. Short crew, he adds, and Papa's mouth does the hard thing it learned on the boat. Pier 19, you ask. Pier 19, he says. Maybe they're short on short crews. He squeezes your shoulder and heads down river with half his hope and all his pride. Henry Street opens like a warm mouth. The teacher meets Marco at the door with a slate full of fractions and a smile that expects him to win. Today we cut apples. And don't fight about where the knife goes, she tells him. He grins like a boy who has never owned an apple and intends to. You. Emma says to you, appearing with a satchel that could carry law or bread or both. Run a message to the church hall. The clerk with the stamp will be there this afternoon. Age papers again. And take these. She hands you a stack of little notebooks. More stubs of pencils. For mothers. For doc men. For kids who remember everything anyway. Paper with elbows. You say paper with knees, too, she says. Use them when doors don't move. The church hall smells like wool drying by a stove and the faint memory of last night's soup. The accident fund table is open again. Clinking, envelopes, rustling. A woman with red hands signs for coal. Her wrist trembles like a candle in a draft. She says thank you to nobody and everyone. In the corner, the priest is practicing saying 10 hours in a tone that makes it sound like a commandment Moses forgot. And the neighborhood remembered. At noon, you run to the charity ward with contraband sugar under your nail again because even laws need sweetness to work. Stefan's fever has slid one more notch down the glass. He looks like a boy who lost a fight to a blanket and came out ahead anyway. The doctor says I can swear at stairs in a week, he tells you, voice rough with relief. I'll start rehearsing now. Save some for Harrison, you say. Marie is sitting up like she never learned what a bed is for. Her braids are sharp enough to count as weapons. She takes the newsprint from your hand and reads the headline out loud in a tone that makes it both insult and victory. They forgot my name, she says, and you watch her pretend to be annoyed and fail nicely. Bring me the whole paper. I'll make a hat out of their compliments. On your way back, you walk past the mill door, just as the first batch of pay envelopes gets handed out since fines got hung on a nail. Kids walk away squinting as if the figures might change if they glare correctly. A boy you don't know counts twice, then runs back to the line to buy his sister a slice of orange. From a pushcart. He splits it with the solemnity of a priest and the skill of a thief. She laughs like medicine that forgot its bitterness. Harrison posts another sheet on the wall hours, temporary adjustments, quotas. See notice of January 30, discipline, subject to review. It's a lot of words to say we are being watched. The inspector nods once and pencils something in his book like a man enjoying facts. The flower tries to talk to a camera and discovers his breath makes fog like the rest of us. The afternoon at the church is a different kind of factory. The stamp clerk sits with his official seal like a bishop with a sacred plate. Mary asks questions that turn memory into law. How old were you when the snow came through the roof, before the big fire? Was the cholera cart on your street the summer you learned to braid? Parents answer, aunts nod. Neighbors correct. Stamp, stamp, stamp. The sound starts to feel like a heartbeat on paper. Stanislas is back. He wears his hat like armor and his new age paper like a shield. School, you remind him. He holds up a second paper teacher's schedule scrawled in Emma's hand, like a boy showing off a fish he did not catch but will learn how. He grins with all of it and runs off to show his mother a future with hinges. The ward healer with the clean hat slides in near the accident table like a cat accounted for in someone else's census. He has a sack from Mr. Murphy, a Ghent coffee, candles, beans that look like a promise if you don't read the small print. We're all for reforms, he says, within reason. He smiles like reason is a trick he invented, then slides his list back into his pocket when he sees Emma note his arrival and your pencil arrive at your paper. Take the beans, Mary tells the widow with red hands, loud enough for the healer to hear. Write down who brought them. The widow does both, without looking anyone in the eye, because pride is a dog that lets only certain people pet it. By 3, the apprenticized students trickled to Henry Street in 2s and 3s. Hats pulled low, defiance trying to decide whether it's hot or cold. The teacher lines them up at a blackboard that shines like a clean thought. Your names, she says. They write them like they are learning how to sign paychecks with their own hands. One boy writes his letter backwards and looks at you, ashamed. We've all been backward at least once, you say, and he flips it without crying. On your way out, you pass the night court clerk in daylight, which is like seeing a fish walking down Delancey. He tips his hat at you a debt paid, interest compounding. Tell your old woman, he says, respectful, not cruel. There's an injunction coming. Flower Man's lawyer is trying it. Says your hymn disturbed his peace. Paper with knees, you say automatically because Emma trained you. We keep moving. We write down who pushes. Do that, he says, and his wink is not the kind that makes your skin crawl. It's the kind that says he wants to be on the side that sleeps better. The injunction arrives before supper like an uninvited uncle, folded, formal, full of words that think highly of themselves. Disturbance, obstruction, unlawful assembly, it says, as if adjectives can move feet. Emma reads it to the room like a teacher reading a fable whose moral she intends to break. We walk, she says. We sing soft. We carry 2 lanterns. You record every shoulder that touches yours. We do not give the flower his riot. The deputy shows up with his baton and a face that has forgotten how to be bored. The Pinkertons pick their teeth with their own smirks. The line forms not a wall, a river. You move, always moving. The hymn is quieter tonight, a hum that keeps the cold from owning your bones. Mothers hold age papers under their shawls like birds they plan to release in spring. Children drag chalk along the edge of the sidewalk, making tall, ridiculous tents that make even the flower step higher just to avoid smudging them. He hates that. You enjoy that he hates it. Disperse, the deputy says, without conviction. You're dispersing, Mary answers, accurate as weather. The priest walks 2 paces behind her like a man who trusts God but not the city. The inspector loiters, purely coincidentally. near your 2 lanterns. The judge from night court passes by on his way to somewhere with supper and pretends not to see you, which is the most helpful thing he can do. By the time you reach Orchard again, the injunction feels like a piece of paper that learned manners. You haven't broken it. You've taught it to live with you. The landlord's man stands under your new window like he planted it. He clears his throat. The owner will. Consider lowering your arrears, he says. Given civic improvements. The phrase hurts his mouth. When he considers lowering the rent to what the law says daylight is worth, Ma replies with a smile that could lift a piano. Send us a postcard. We like pictures. He leaves, happy to be alive. Papa gets home with a half day from Pier 19 and a grin he's embarrassed to wear. They needed a quick back, he says, rolling his bandage like he's negotiating with it. Tomorrow again, they said. Maybe that means today, still. He pulls an orange out of his pocket. The city has developed a sudden affection for oranges and sets it on the table like a trophy. Bruised beyond sale, he insists. Anna does not care about the provenance of joy. After supper, you walk him to civics. The church hall is warmer than honesty and just as bright. Emma writes injunction on the blackboard and underlines it twice. A court that won't say the thing you want will sometimes say the thing you can use, she says. Learn the shape of their words so you can move around them without falling. Papa signs his name again, Zoand. The flourish on the Z is bigger this time. He looks at it the way men look at bridges they didn't know they were allowed to cross. Marco copies it on his slate and shows it to you with a pride that wants to be hidden and refuses. Hospital, you ask Ma quietly. She nods. 5 minutes, she says. Bring their laughter back when you come. Marie is awake and furious at a pillow that has opinions. I'm on the stoop Thursday, she announces before hello. You will act surprised and bring me something that makes me look important. I'll bring a judge's gavel, you say. She smiles, with all the stitches and none of the pain. Stefan sleeps while not sleeping, the fever finally stepping back without falling. You stand at the foot of his bed and make a deal with a god you don't always trust. 1 degree now, 2 stronger steps later. The nurse hears you and doesn't. Laugh. That's good civics, she says. The theology will catch up. On the way home, the ward healer appears from a doorway as if he were a punctuation mark dropped by a careless sentence. There's a meeting tomorrow, he says. Ward hall. Mr. Murphy wants to say he's with you. Bring your people. He pats his pocket. You pat yours. You both know which lists you're keeping. We'll come, you say, because Emma says you never waste a microphone. We'll ask him to sign the age papers with us. Put his flower on the line where the law lives. Make it a picture. The healer does arithmetic behind his eyes and decides he won't lose money on that. Maybe, he says. Upstairs, the new stair doesn't groan. The window closes without threatening to take your fingers as hostage. The blanket with edges tucks the day in without complaining. Marco has fallen asleep with a 10 drawn across his knuckles like brass. Anna has an orange peel crown and no regrets. Papa sets the clipping on the table and smooths it flat like a map. Tomorrow, he asks. Line, school, dock if you can, ward hall if they don't lock the doors, you say. Inspectors follow up in the afternoon. Chalk in the morning. If the snow doesn't take all the sidewalks for itself, he nods. Busy, city, you answer. You lie down, the corn husks whisper. Outside, the river clears its throat and sends one low note through the night that says I am here, even if nobody can afford to be. Somewhere, a press is chewing fresh headlines. Somewhere, a clerk is fetching a stamp that will make a girl 14 on paper and free in the world. Somewhere, a judge is telling his wife he saw a protest that felt like a prayer. Somewhere, a Pinkerton is practicing boredom he doesn't feel. You let yourself build one small scene to stack under your head like an extra pillow. Thursday, Marie. On the stoop, pretending to hold court and failing because everybody's actually listening. Saturday, Stefan, cursing a stare out of love. Sunday, a priest saying 10 hours like he was born to it. 2 weeks from now, another meeting in the hall, another inspector's frown in the right direction. Harrison, angry in a ward hall. Thursday shows up with its boots on. The snow lost its shine overnight and turned honest grey at the curbs, crusted where carts cut it, soft where kids tested it. You swallow a mouthful of cold with your bread and call it breakfast, because that's how mornings negotiate with boys. Shape up, Papa says, rolling his bandage the way a man rolls dice and pretends not to watch. School. You tell Marco, who is working a fraction so hard his tongue has to help. Line. You tell yourself, and your bones answer like they have a union. But first, the stooped up Marie sits there in a shawl a little too thin for January and a posture that keeps the whole block warm. The doctor said fresh air, and she took it like a throne. Someone gave her a cushion. Someone else brought a tin mug that thinks it's a chalice. You brought a newspaper so she can make a hat out of yesterday's compliments. She wears it crooked on purpose. You're late, she says. I'm 12. You say excuses. She snorts, and then her eyes soften when she sees the candy you smuggled under your cuff. She doesn't eat it yet. She keeps it like a secret that belongs to a better hour. Neighbors drift past the way, birds test a fountain, cautious, hopeful, ready to flee. They don't. Marie has gravity. She compliments a baby like it invented hands. She bullies a boy into washing before school with a promise to notice his effort. She taxes a dockman, one joke for the privilege of walking by her throne. By the time you leave, you realize something quietly true. The block is back to taking itself seriously. Sometimes power looks like a woman on a stoop, telling people to drink water and fight smarter at the river. The shape-up is winter with an audience. The hiring boss calls names like debts. The foreman with the clean hat pretends it's the weather deciding who eats. Enzo, the boss says, generous for exactly 1 heartbeat. Then the whisper leans into his ear, and the generosity evaporates like a puddle heard a sermon. Short crew, he adds. The words weigh a pound each. Pier 19, Papa says without swearing. He pats your shoulder once, the kind of touch that says, I am still your father even when the river forgets it. You nod like a foreman who knows what he can't fix. Henry Street is already boiling coffee and hope. Marco dives into sums like a boy who just realized numbers can put food on a table, not just make your head sore. The nurse teacher puts a copybook in your hand lined crisp, a smell like brand new promises. For minutes, she says. Minutes, you ask. Ward hall, she says. You'll need proof of what was promised when they pretend not to remember. Paper with elbows meets paper with ears. Outside Anderson, the new belt guards still shine like honest teeth. The inspector has the look of a man who intends to be bored into righteousness all winter. Harrison stands in the doorway with a jaw that would gladly evict you if it were a landlord. The flower on the lapel guards save. The flower has survived to another day of pretending not to be ridiculous. He waves at a photographer as if the lens owes him money. Compliance continues. Harrison says, counting continues. Mary answers and taps her notebook without looking at him. That tap is a bell the block hears. Kids add fresh chalk too. The sidewalk 1410, little zeros full of teeth. An apprentice student slips by with a coil of yarn and a look that says the door is a mouth and he is learning how not to be food. You touch his sleeve. Half day at Henry Street, you say, eyebrows doing what mouths can't in front of supervisors. He mimes a salute and keeps moving. That's obedience enough for now. Noon finds you at the charity ward with contraband. Sugar and the copybook. The square-jawed nurse gives you 5 extra minutes with a blink that says use them like they cost somebody you don't like. Stefan is practicing how to hate stairs in theory before he meets them in person. You should. Hear the new cuss I invented, he croaks. Proud and priest-proof. I'll save it for Harrison. You say, nah, he grins. Waste of poetry. Marie, on her throne, has collected tributes. A spool of red thread. 2 buttons that don't match but would go to the same party. A slice of orange that made for children temporarily believers. You show her the copybook, minutes. You tell her, Ward Hall. She leans forward like a general over a map. Write down who touches the paper, she says, and make him use a pencil with a short life. Emma appears at your elbow as if conjured by the word paper. She has a satchel that holds law, bandages, and sandwiches in equal measure. Rules, she says, because she's kind enough to give you homework. When Mr. Murphy talks, we listen standing. When we talk sitting. Makes him look like he came to us because he did. She taps the copybook. Name the asks before he offers turkeys. Don't make the block cheap, the asks. You say, pen waiting like a dog that wants orders. 5, she says, and Mary nods as if the number were her favorite. 1, Emma says, holding up a finger that has paper cuts for rings. Public pledge, no child in the ward employed. Under 14, not at Anderson, not at the brewery, not in any place with a floor and a foreman. Tie it to a list of licensed shops. If a boss breaks it, he loses his license. 2, Mary says. Accident fund permanent, not a winter's guilt. Company matches the church and Henry Street monthly. Widow doesn't apologize for coal. 3, Emma says. Tenement fixes enforced. Stairs, windows, privias with doors. He says the word inspection without choking on it. 4, the priest adds, stepping close, collar up, conscience awake. Half-day schooling for any minor apprentice. Actual books, actual attendance, not a hat you put on to be legal. 5, you say before you can stop yourself, no blacklists, or if they pretend they don't exist, a fund for men who keep being short crew until spring. Emma smiles like you just figured out the shape of your own mouth. 5, she agrees, and a 6th if he's foolish. What's the 6th, you ask? A photograph with the pledge, she says, so the paper remembers what his face looked like when he said yes. Ward Hall is a box of air and oak and men who like their names echoed. The ceiling is high enough to trap promises and make them echo slowly back down. Benches creak with block weight. The ward healer has shaved his mustache into sincerity. The flower has brought friends with lapels and opinions. Mr. Murphy himself floats in wearing the kind of coat that thinks the owner owns things. Friends, he says, voice, like butter on the wrong bread. We are, all of us, for the working family. Within reason, the healer murmurs, because habits are faithful even when they don't help. Mary stands. She does not curtsy to the air. We have 5 reasonable things, she says, and the hall leans toward her like a body toward bread. She lists them, not fast, not slow, no children under 14, anywhere with a license, a CCIDENT fund, permanent and matched. Tenement fixes enforced with real inspections. Half-day school for any minor working any hours that still smell like child. No blacklists or a fund that admits they exist. She finishes and folds her hands on the shawl. Like a judge who doesn't need a bench, Mr. Murphy smiles the way a man smiles when he expects to bargain down a widow. We've already delivered much, he says. Guards on belts. A fund. The city didn't show up on Orchard at midnight with lanterns, Mary says. We did. Sign. Emma slides the pledge onto the table, like a dealer who knows which cards are heavy. It's short, nobody gets to hide in adjectives. The priest places a pen next to it like a sacrament. The flower clears his throat. There are processes, he says. Committees, budgets, elections. Right, we will do it, Emma says sweetly. Or we don't want to be photographed not doing it. Either is good paper. Laughter cracks the room open, just enough for hope to slip in without boots. The reporter with the warmer hat, good for him, leans on the back wall, pretending to be the wall. The inspector is there too, ghosting the aisle, as if compliance followed him like a dog. Mr. Murphy tries the turkey route. We can distribute coal, he says. Food baskets. A dance at Lent. Coal is number 6 after you sign 1 through 5, Mary says. And dances come with tickets that cost a nickel and a signature. He looks at you when the room gets louder, because sometimes men look for a small face to save them from. Big women, son, he says kindly. You don't want to be political. I want to be not dead. You say before your fear can filter it. Silence does as it's told. You keep going because the quiet made a space and your words remembered. They have legs. Timothy Brennan has no arm, you say. The Polish girl has an arm that doesn't know what to do anymore. Marie sat on a stoop this morning and made the blocks stand up straighter. Stefan is practicing how to swear at stairs because he kept his foot. We're 12 and 13 and 14 and we're tired. Paper with teeth took our pennies. Paper with elbows got us some back. This paper, you tapped the pledge, is so I can say my sister Anna never saw the inside of the mill except on a tour when the priest made jokes about the emergency stop. You didn't plan to say Anna's name. Saying it makes the room smaller in a way that helps. People look at the door like a little girl is about to walk in wearing 8s on her fists. Mr. Murphy picks up the pen because sometimes even a man, built out of favors, recognizes when a tide wants to be a river and he would like to be seen swimming. We pledge, he says, and the pen makes the sound pens make when they are actually writing something that wants to still exist tomorrow. Name. Emma says, quiet as snow. He writes it, first, last, flourish. The healer signs next, because he has to follow his hat. The priest signs where the accident fund lives. Mary signs like a woman sealing a deck before a storm. The inspector writes his name in the margin so boys like you can point at it later and say out loud, you were here. Photograph, Emma says, too fast for them to think better. She arranges the bodies the way a carpenter arranges chairs on a floor with a slope. She puts the pledge at chest height, not table height, no hands hiding. She makes Mr. Murphy hold the paper with Mary like they're carrying a baby. The reporters. Flash cracks. The room remembers it has a future. The The Pinkertons are bored in a way wolves are bored at lamb school. The deputy taps his baton like a metronome that can't find the song. The flower tries to get into the middle of the picture and fails twice. The block watches like a jury that already voted. When it's done, the hall exhales in pieces. People come, shake hands with their own choices. A dockman puts a nickel into the accident fund tin like buying a seat at a show he wants to keep running. A widow holds the pledge for 1 second with both hands and then puts it back down fast because she never holds anything breakable, if she can help it. You hand the copybook to Emma and she writes in it as if it were a sacrament. Who signed, who touched, who flinched, who smiled at the wrong time. Minutes, she says. Not for memory, for court. Outside, Orchard Street returns to its job of being the narrow between two buildings that like each other more this week. The snow gives up pretending to be new and becomes useful into boots, hammered into steps, shoveled into piles that will be small, dirty mountains the children conquer before they melt. You take a route that goes past the hospital because the nurse said messy prayers work, and yours forgot to end. Last night, Stefan is asleep, mouth open, breathing like a man who didn't before. Marie is holding court again, this time from a bench by a window that pretends to be a balcony. You hold up 2 fingers. She holds up 5 demands. You give her a thumbs up. She gives you a gavel motion with her fist. The nurse rolls her eyes and hides a smile. You count that in your head, at the mill. Apprenticized student spill out at the half-day change. Hands inked with letters that will buy them something. Later, the inspector takes notes like a man building a fortress out of pencil. Harrison posts a notice because the inspector's shadow is loud. Apprentices required to present school paper every Friday. Emma calls it a miracle with receipts. The injunction men lurk but don't pounce. You walk the picket slowly, to lanterns the whole evening. One song under your breath that is too soft to arrest and too loud to forget. The deputy says, move along to a line that already is. The judge from night court passes again, pretends he doesn't see you again, softens around the eyes again. If that's politics, you'll take it. Back at your building, the landlord's man brings a carpenter who learned the word plumb and decided to live by it. The fixed stare doesn't complain. The window closes without threatening to keep your fingers. He leaves a paper on the crate inspected with a date and a seal. Ma tucks it into the bread tin like a saint's bone. Papa limps home with a full day from Pier 19 and the posture of a man who knows. Tomorrow might be friendlier if he says thank you to no gods, but tries to be one anyway. He sets an orange on the table. Bruised beyond sale, he says, and nobody bothers to pretend that's the point. Anna slices it slow enough to shame the clock. Ward Hall, Papa asks, rolling his wrist as if to remind it this is what victory feels like. Still sore. They signed, you say, and put the pledge on the table for his eyes, and smiled for the camera. He looks at the names like a map. He traces the inspector's signature with a finger and then stops, because he's a man who knows not to smudge. The ink that will hold you tomorrow, civics, he asks. Tomorrow, you say. Minutes to write tonight. He nods and does the brave thing. He admits he is tired. Read me what you wrote, he says anyway, and you do. The words sound different when they're on your voice and not just in your head. They sound like a boy trying to build a table and discovering legs on a page. You lie down. The corn husks give up their meanest crackles. Marco sleeps with chalk on his knuckles like he got in a fight with an 8 and 1. Anna dreams with an orange peel crown and an expression that forgives the whole day without asking it to change. Faster. Ma douses the lamp and the room keeps a small glow anyway because some promises light things outside. The river says, that long low thing it says when fairy horns talk to bridges. You imagine the photograph, drying at the paper, Mr. Murphy's pen in the frame, Mary's finger a breath from the pledge, the inspector's eyes like borders, the priest looking like a man unlearning how to be surprised, Emma's spectacles, laughing. You imagine the next meeting in 2 weeks and the chalk still there under whatever snow tries to hide it. You imagine the first morning the whistle sounds and nobody flinches because 10 hours is not mercy, but it's less theft. You give yourself one last scene because the day owes you interest. Stefan's first stare cursed into compliance. Marie's stoop, renamed by the block without asking anyone's permission. Harrison discovering quotas behave better when you stop lying on paper. The ward healer misplacing his list and remembering your notebook instead. Papa's name staying on a ledger in ink a long time. Marco writing minutes in the margin of his math just to amuse himself. Anna practicing the number 8 until it stops. Being a number and starts being the shape of a day she lived without counting it. Tomorrow, the inspector will come back with his clipboard like a dog on a leash. Tomorrow, the apprentices will bring paper that smells like chalk and victory. Tomorrow, the ward office will try a softer version of the same smile. Tomorrow, you will write it down. Tomorrow, again. And this time, the page is waiting for your hand. When the whistle changed, the city wakes like it always does, late to its own exhaustion, early to its own need. But something small and disobedient is in the air, like a new word practicing inside a mouth. You can't see it yet. You can feel it, the way you feel a coin in your pocket before you remember where it came from. Breakfast is the usual, the last honorable slice of bread. The coffee that's mostly courage, but the table is different because there's paper. On it, not a notice nailed to a foreman's wall. Your paper, the copybook with the ward hall minutes in your hand. Names written down with no room for forgetting. Mr. Murphy's signature heavy as a doorstop. The inspector's name in the margin, a border that says, "Here, this happened. Shape up," Papa says, rolling his bandage like a hinge that needs convincing. School. You tell Marco, who has started doing sums in the corners of every scrap of paper, as if arithmetic were a game you play until your luck improves. Line, you tell yourself, because outside the mill door is where you made yourself into someone the city can't ignore by accident. 2 weeks after Ward Hall, the first review is a hymn disguised as a meeting. The church hall smells like wool and ink and soup that hasn't yet admitted it's delicious. The mediator reads, the inspector affirms, Emma translates into sentences the block can carry. Guards on belts, installed and greased, emergency stops, tested in front of eyes that don't blink. Fines, still suspended. Harrison's nails can't hold them up anymore. Accident fund. Not a hat passed around, but a ledger with monthly columns and the priest saying amounts out loud so shame can't hide between numbers. Age papers, stamped and copied, one at Henry Street, one in the sacristy, one in a mother's pocket that now refuses to empty. 10 hours in 60 days, the mediator repeats, and you write the date in your copybook like you're carving it into a tree. The flower starts to speak. Mary taps the table once. He changes his mind. The Pinkertons look bored like wolves at a sheep school, but even they can count to 60 outside. chalk returns to the sidewalk. Big 14s with teeth inside the zeros. 10s drawn like suns with rays, because why not? Someone adds a neat 60, gives 10, with an arrow that looks like it has elbows. Stefan's fever steps back and keeps going. The square-jawed nurse puts a crutch under his arm, and the hallway becomes a training ground for curses that don't scare mothers. Stairs, he says to you, breathless from a test run. Tell them I'm coming. I'll warn them, you say. Marie holds court from a stoop, draped in a shawl, thin as January, but strong as neighborhood. The doctor prescribed fresh air. The block prescribed attention. She gathers it and redistributes it like a priest who remembers bread. She taxes every passerby one kindness. The tax gets paid. At the docks, the shape-up is still a place where men negotiate with winter. The hiring boss calls names like debts. The foreman's clean hat still holds whispers. Some mornings are still short crew, the ugliest lie that sounds like weather. But Pier 19 has started liking Papa's name, and he comes home with a day's pay more often than a shrug. He writes his name into boulder now, in his little notebook, as if ink could teach ledgers manners. 2 more weeks pass. Another review. Another inspector's frown pointed in the right direction. The temporary quota, which clung like burrs, finally gets pulled off in public. Harrison posts a notice because the inspector is watching. Quotas restored. Stoppages due to guards excluded. He tries to make it sound like a favor. The block treats it like a receipt. The injunction men return with papers that puff themselves up like pigeons pretending to be hawks. Emma reads the new one out loud, savoring every silly clause. We walk, she says again. We sing soft 2 lanterns. Keep moving. Write down every hand that touches you wrong. Civics is how to be a problem correctly. The deputy's baton ticks like a metronome, looking for a song and not finding one. Because your hymn refuses a beat it doesn't choose. The ward healer with the neat hat keeps bringing beans and wants you to call them favors. You keep writing his name with the day's date next to it and calling that paper. Within reason, he says one afternoon out of habit. Within reason, Mary repeats, and then names 5 reasonable things and a 6th for dessert, just to keep his appetite honest. 60 days is a long walk when you count in shifts. It's also nothing. Because children learn a season by taste. The way cold bites differently in March than in January. The way light lingers longer before supper. Your chalk 10s start looking less like a dare and more like a schedule. And then, it's today, 10 hours. The morning whistle rips the dark, as usual. Mean as always. A voice that never learned please. You pull on yesterday's clothes, because there is no such thing as today's clothes in your house. Your boots argue with the road and lose. They'll try again tomorrow. But when you reach the mill, something is different, and not shy about it. A city inspector stands by the clock with a pocket watch in his hand and a priest beside him who looks like he's ready to forgive and ready to testify. In that order. Harrison is a portrait of compliance, jaw arranged into what he imagines decency. Looks like Mary is already chalking the sidewalk. 5:30 to 3:30, she writes. Numbers so big even the 3rd floor foreman can read. The mediator's assistant stands with a sheet of paper and a face that intends to record a miracle, as if it were only punctuality. The shift starts. The machines roar, but something in the room is wrong with that lighter by a pound, perhaps. Guards rattle and hold. Emergency stops get tested on purpose. A boy you don't know, not small enough to be a sweeper, not old enough to be safe, comes off his half-day to show a teacher slip at the door. The clerk stamps it like a visa to a country that believes in morning and afternoon equally. Noon comes and is not the midpoint anymore. You feel it in your bones before the clock admits it. The afternoon is shorter than your fear remembers. There's a place beyond the wall you used to hit at 3 o'clock, a space where exhaustion would set up camp and start a new country in your muscles. Today you walk past it. It looks surprised you didn't stop to live there. 3:25. The line begins to move toward the clock, as if someone pushed the city on its hinge. The inspector takes out his watch and then doesn't need it, because you can hear the difference in the building's breathing. The whistle hasn't blown yet, and boys are already looking up by reflex. The way soldiers look up when a bird changes the light. 3:30, the whistle. Not the morning scream, the other one. The one that has always sounded like permission you didn't believe. It cuts the day off, not with a knife, but with a key. You punch out, and the card's stamp kisses back a minute you used to. Oh. The door opens onto daylight. Real daylight. Not a shabby scrap of sun squeezed between alleys at 6:30. Afternoon light that has the nerve to be soft. You step into it like a man into warm water, and you laugh without meaning to. Outside, the sidewalk is louder than the machines. Not a riot, a harvest. Mothers are standing on the curb with their arms crossed and their fists unclenched. They look like they're about to scold a day for being stingy, and then realize it gave you something and decide to let it live. The priest says 10 hours, quietly, as if practicing for Sunday and for himself. Kids bounce like marbles set loose. Apprentices, students flash their paper like passports and then put it away because they don't want to get ink on their celebration. The deputy counts lanterns and forgets what number comes after 2. The Pinkertons smoke and try on boredom like a coat they suddenly don't need. You run first to the river because you promised the boy you were to see water that wasn't a reflection in a factory window. You don't reach the ocean, your feet and your life don't have that radius, but the East River is a throat singing toward it. You stand on the pier with your hands on the railing and let the cold bite you in a way that feels like mercy. Ships talk to each other in horn syllables you now understand without grammar. Here, here, here. Tomorrow used to mean pain on a loop. Today it means you can come back to this pier again before dark. Maybe bring Anna. Maybe teach her to count the horns like numbers that chose their own shapes. You double back to Henry Street because Marco had half-day letters and you want to show him a sun that isn't about math. He runs out with chalk on his knuckles and a fraction in his mouth and then sees your face and drops the fraction mid-sentence like a miracle bent it. Now, he asks. Now, you say. You fetch Anna from Ma's elbow. She argues and then sees the light and doesn't. You three walk fast through streets. Your feet know too well and notice them new anyway. Pushcarts shine. Even the ward healer's hat looks less foolish. He tips it at your passing and pretends he invented 10 hours. You let him have that pretend for a block because your pockets are full with better things. On the pier, Anna leans so far over you have to grab her coat. She laughs at the water like it just got caught cheating at something. Marco counts waves and loses track on purpose. You look out and see a blue that promises you don't have to swallow the whole world to taste it. There is still everything, rent, bread. The landlord's man will come back with a face that looks like a bill. Harrison's jaw will figure out a new way to be annoying. The injunction will breed a cousin with different adjectives. The Pinkertons will perfect boredom again. Tenement house inspectors will come and go. 1,000 cities like yours will have to learn this lesson one sidewalk at a time. You know all that the way you know your own hands. The cuts, the calluses, the places where feeling is still shy. And the stair at home doesn't creak like it used to, because a carpenter learned the word plumb. The window closes without threatening to keep your fingers a hostage. The bread tin has one extra coin in it tonight because fines are still dead, and the 10-hour day gave you back 30 cents worth of childhood. The accident fund ledger has new handwriting in it, a woman steady, unapologetic. The inspector nods to you in the street now, the way men nod to other men who saw the same thing and wrote it down. Emma teaches a new word in civics press, makes you use it in a sentence. The 10 hours here are a precedent for 10 hours there. It feels like putting your foot on the first stair of a long flight you intend to climb. At supper, Papa tells the river's jokes as if he wrote them. He didn't, but he made them worth hearing. He has a full day in his pocket and an orange on the table and no apology in either hand. He asks about Ward Hall, about minutes, about the next review. The one in another fortnight that will be routine if you have your way and revolutionary anyway, Stoop Court. He asks, eyes sliding toward the window because he's heard Marie's voice all afternoon in the street, like a bell that stopped asking permission to ring. Open for business, you say. You carry a slice of contraband sugar under your cuff. Again, because some traditions are worth keeping, even when you're winning. Marie takes it like a bribe and calls it tribute. Stefan clanks up the stair with his crutch and curses the top step into civility. Neighbors don't clap. That's not how it works, but the stoop shifts its weight to make room for one more version of back. Night comes without the whistle biting a piece out of it. You still have to sleep soon, but the neighborhood isn't being evicted from its evening anymore. Men leave their boots by the door with a little less hatred. Women measure laundry with one less sigh. Kids steal a game in the alley that doesn't cost a finger. The hymn you hum at the picket creeps into these hours by accident, and nobody mind. Before bed, you take the copybook out and add today the time on the clock. The inspector's nod, the priest's mouth when he said 10. Harrison's notice, the children's chalk, the river at 4 o'clock. The way Anna laughed hard enough that a woman at a window 2 floors up laughed too without knowing why. Minutes, not for memory, for court. For the day when someone says it didn't happen like this, and you put the book in their hand. Wait first, ink second. Then you write one more thing you didn't plan. It arrives whole, like some sentences do when they've been practicing behind your ribs. We are not done, but we are not where we were. The machine is still hungry, so are we. But today, for the first time, it did not eat the whole day. You set the pencil down. It has gotten smaller fighting for you. It deserves to rest. The cornhusk mattress crackles less meanly. Marco sleeps with chalk and fractions smeared across his fingers like he lost a fight to learning and refuses to care. Anna wears an orange peel crown again, queen of a kingdom that learned a new law. Ma leaves the lamp low and the blanket with edges tucked just right, practicing the future like a ceremony. Outside, the river sends that long, low note it uses to talk in winter. You answer it in your head with the whistle at 3:30 and the sound. The inspector's watch made when he closed it, and the way a block breathes out when a door that used to be locked opens because paper elbowed through.